Welcome aboard, friends. You're now tuned into another Harry. We're super excited to share today's story with you. What if Alastor's radio demon powers found Harry locked in the cupboard and he made him his apprentice at age 6? If you enjoy what we do here, the best way to support us is by liking, commenting, and subscribing. We read every comment. Ready? Let's go. Chapter 1, The Demon in the Cupboard. The cupboard under the stairs was dark. Always dark. 6-year-old Harry Potter curled into himself, knees tucked under his chin, glasses askew on his nose. His stomach growled. How long had it been since Aunt Petunia had shoved a piece of toast through the grate? 1 day. 2. Freak, Uncle Vernon had yelled before slamming the cupboard door. Stay in there until you learn your lesson. What lesson? Harry hadn't meant to end up on the school roof. 1 minute Dudley's gang was chasing him, the next, whoosh, he was looking down at their confused faces. The school called it, climbing school property. Uncle Vernon called it, more of your freakishness. Harry traced patterns in the dust. Spiders crawled across the ceiling, his only friends in this place. A particularly bold one dangled right above his head. At least you're free to leave whenever you want, Harry whispered. The spider twitched as if in response. Harry sighed and rolled onto his back, staring at nothing. He'd learned to ignore the hunger pangs, learned to hold his bladder until they finally let him out to use the toilet. Learned that crying made no difference. A faint crackling sound caught his attention. Harry sat up, banging his head on the low ceiling. He rubbed the sore spot and listened harder. The sound came again, static, like a radio that couldn't find a station. Weird. The Dursleys never put a radio near his cupboard. The static grew louder. Sharper. More deliberate. Click. Buzz. Crack. Hello. Harry whispered. The static twisted, warped, then, laughed. A tinny, old-fashioned laugh, like from those black and white shows Aunt Petunia sometimes watched when no one was around. Well, well, well. What do we have here? The voice crackled through the static, sounding like an old-time radio announcer. A little morsel of potential, all locked away. Harry scrambled backward until his spine pressed against the wall. Who's there? Just a passing traveler, my boy. One who appreciates interesting things. The shadows in the cupboard deepened, darkened. They shouldn't have been able to get darker, but they did. They moved wrong, like thick liquid instead of absence of light. Tell me, child, the voice continued, do you enjoy your accommodations? Harry's heart pounded. Are you in the walls? A chuckle rippled through the static. I'm everywhere and nowhere, my young friend. The question is, why are you in here? The shadows in the corner bunched together, thickened, and then, eyes. Glowing red eyes and a wide, too wide smile materialized in the darkness. Harry bit back a scream. He'd seen monsters in Dudley's comics, but never one with a smile that literally glowed in the dark, never one that seemed to be made of the darkness itself. Oh, don't be frightened. The smile widened impossibly further. If I wanted to harm you, we wouldn't be having this delightful conversation. The shadows stretched, pulled, and suddenly there was a figure crouching in the cupboard. A tall, thin man in a red pinstriped suit, with skin the color of ash, deer-like antlers protruding from his head, and that same terrifying smile. He adjusted a monocle over one of his red eyes and twirled a microphone-topped cane. Alastor's the name, entertainment's the game. He extended a clawed hand toward Harry, his movements accompanied by the sound of a radio audience applauding. Harry didn't take the hand. You can't be real. I'm hungry. I'm seeing things. Oh, I'm quite real, my boy. Alastor's head tilted at an unnatural angle. Though not in the way most things in your world are real. Let's just say I operate on a different frequency. He laughed at his own joke, a burst of static accompanying it. Why are you here? Harry asked, curiosity overcoming fear. That's the question, isn't it? Alastor leaned forward, his face inches from Harry's. I sensed something unusual. A ripple in the fabric between worlds. He poked Harry's chest with one long finger. Coming from you. Me? Indeed. You're positively buzzing with untapped power, child. It's what drew me here, like a moth to a particularly bright flame. Harry shook his head. I'm not special. I'm just Harry. Alastor's laugh filled the small space. Just Harry? My dear boy, nothing could be further from the truth. Tell me, have strange things ever happened around you? Things you couldn't explain. Things that made these. He gestured around the cupboard, individuals lock you away. Harry hesitated. The school roof. Dudley tripping when chasing him, though Harry hadn't touched him. His teacher's hair turning blue. I see you understand, Alastor said, though Harry hadn't spoken. What would you say if I told you I could teach you to control those abilities? To make them work for you, rather than against you? You could teach me. Harry's voice was small, hopeful. My dear boy, Alastor's grin somehow stretched wider, I could make you my apprentice. Before Harry could respond, heavy footsteps thumped down the stairs above, sending dust raining onto his head. Boy! Stop that muttering in there. Uncle Vernon's voice boomed through the door. Alastor's form seemed to flatten, slipping into the shadows. We'll continue this conversation later, his voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere. For now, I believe I should observe. Harry opened his mouth to protest, but Alastor had vanished, leaving only a faint static hanging in the air. The cupboard door flew open, and Uncle Vernon's purple face appeared. Who were you talking to, boy? And no one, Uncle Vernon. Vernon grabbed Harry by the collar and yanked him out. Lying again. Talking to yourself like a proper lunatic now, are you? I wasn't, Petunia. Vernon shouted. The boy's gone round the bend. Talking to himself in there. Aunt Petunia's horse-like face peered around the kitchen doorway. Probably plotting more freakishness, she sniffed. Well, he can plot while he weeds the garden. The Johnsons are coming for dinner, and everything must be perfect. Vernon shoved Harry toward the back door. Not a sound from you, understand? One peep, one strange occurrence, and you'll be in that cupboard until Christmas. Harry stumbled outside into the blinding sunlight, blinking rapidly. Had he imagined the strange visitor? The man, creature, with the radio voice and glowing smile. As he knelt in the dirt and began pulling weeds, Harry noticed his shadow behaving oddly. It seemed darker than it should be, and did it just wink at him? A soft static buzzed near his ear. Don't mind me, my boy. Just getting the lay of the land. Quite the charming family you have here. Harry jerked upright, looking around wildly. They can't hear me, child. Only you. Alastor's voice seemed to come from Harry's own shadow. I must say, I haven't seen such delectable cruelty in the mortal realm for decades. Your relatives are absolutely fascinating specimens. They're horrible, Harry whispered. Oh, indeed. Marvelously so. Such petty tyranny. Such mundane malice. Alastor sounded genuinely delighted. Tell me, would you like to see them squirm? Despite himself, Harry felt a spark of interest. Can you do that? My dear boy, making people squirm is my specialty. The shadow at Harry's feet rippled with silent laughter. But first, let's see what you can do. I told you, I can't do anything, Harry mumbled, glancing nervously at the kitchen window where Aunt Petunia might be watching. Nonsense. That incident on the roof wasn't nothing. Focus now. See that garden hose? Imagine it moving. Imagine it slithering like a snake. I can't, you can, Alastor's voice hardened slightly. Focus. Want it. See it. Harry stared at the coiled garden hose. Nothing happened. Feel your frustration, child. Your anger at being locked away, starved, treated like vermin. Let it build. Let it fuel your desire to see something, anything, change at your command. Heat built in Harry's chest. The unfairness of it all. 6 years of cupboards and hand-me-downs and being called freak. 6 years of watching Dudley get everything while he got nothing. The garden hose twitched. Yes. Alastor's voice crackled with excitement. More. The hose uncoiled slightly. Then more. It rose from the ground, swaying like a charmed snake. I'm doing it, Harry breathed. I'm really doing it. Splendid. Now, what would happen if your dear aunt looked out the window right now? As if on cue, Petunia's face appeared at the kitchen window. Her eyes bulged. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. The back door flew open. What are you doing? She shrieked. Stop at this instant. Harry's concentration broke. The hose dropped to the ground with a thud. Vernon! Vernon! Petunia screamed. He's doing it again. The freakishness. Heavy footsteps pounded through the house. Vernon appeared, face purple with rage. You, he bellowed, charging toward Harry. Harry scrambled backward, terror replacing his momentary triumph. Allow me, Alastor's voice purred. Suddenly, the shadows around the yard lengthened, darkened, despite the bright afternoon sun. They stretched toward Vernon like grasping hands. Vernon froze mid-stride. What the? Static filled the air, growing louder until it hurt the ears. The garden seemed to darken further, as if the sun itself feared what was happening. And then, rising from Harry's shadow like a nightmare made real, Alastor materialized. He stood 8 feet tall, his antlers scraping the lowest branches of the nearby tree, his smile literally glowing with malevolent delight. Good afternoon. Alastor's voice boomed, overlaid with crackling static. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Vernon stumbled backward. Petunia shrieked and clutched the doorframe. What? Who? Vernon sputtered. Alastor, at your service. He dipped into a theatrical bow. Radio demon, interdimensional traveler, and, he placed a protective hand on Harry's shoulder, this young man's new mentor. Demon? Petunia whispered, her face draining of all color. The very same. Alastor twirled his microphone staff. And I must say, I've been observing your hospitality toward my young apprentice here. His eyes narrowed, the radio static growing harsher. I'm not impressed. Vernon found his voice. Now see here. This is my house, and that boy is. Alastor moved faster than human eyes could track. One moment he stood beside Harry, the next his face was inches from Vernon's, that terrible smile stretched impossibly wide. That boy, Alastor said softly, dangerously, is under my protection now. Vernon tried to step back but found he couldn't move. The shadows had wrapped around his ankles like chains. We've had enough of his freakishness in this house. Vernon blustered, though his voice shook. Take him with you if you want him. Oh, I intend to spend quite a lot of time with young Harry, Alastor straightened, tapping his chin thoughtfully. But I think he needs to remain here for now. A foot in both worlds, you might say. We won't have it. Petunia found her courage from somewhere. We never wanted him in the first place. Dumped on our doorstep after his good-for-nothing parents got themselves killed, Harry's head snapped up. You told me they died in a car crash. Details, Alastor waved his hand dismissively. The important thing now is establishing our new arrangement. With a flick of his wrist, the shadows around the yard coalesced into a contract that hovered in midair, text appearing on it as Alastor spoke. Item 1, young Harry will be given the second bedroom upstairs. That piglet you call a son can manage with one room for his excessive belongings. Vernon's face purpled further. Now see here, Alastor's eyes flashed dangerously. Item 2, Harry will be properly fed, clothed, and treated with basic human dignity. The demon's voice dropped an octave. I have rather low standards for humanity, but even I draw the line at starving children. We never, Petunia began. Please, Alastor's voice was suddenly silky smooth. Let's not add lying to your list of charming qualities. He continued, Item 3, Harry will have time each day for his training with me. You will not interfere. Training in what? Vernon demanded, finding a shred of courage. Magic, of course. Alastor cackled at their horrified expressions. Oh yes, the boy has it in spades. Quite the natural talent. We swore when we took him and we'd stamp it out of him. Petunia hissed. Alastor's laughter cut off abruptly. The air around them seemed to darken further. When he spoke again, his voice had a dangerous edge that made even Harry shiver. My dear lady, you cannot stamp out what is intrinsic to his being. That would be like trying to stamp out his blood. He leaned closer to her. Though I suspect you've considered that option as well. Petunia paled further. Now, Alastor straightened, his jovial demeanor returning, I believe we understand each other. You'll treat young Harry appropriately, give him space for his development, and I won't have to show you exactly why the denizens of hell tremble at the mention of my name. The contract rolled itself up and vanished with a puff of smoke. Do we have an agreement? Alastor extended his hand toward Vernon, which glowed with an eerie blue light. Vernon looked at the hand as if it were a venomous snake. What choice do we have? None whatsoever. Alastor said cheerfully. That's what makes it so entertaining. Reluctantly, Vernon took the demon's hand. A flash of blue light sealed the deal. Splendid. Alastor clapped his hands. Harry, gather what meager possessions you have. You're moving upstairs. Still stunned by everything that had happened, Harry hurried to his cupboard and collected his few belongings, some broken toy soldiers Dudley had discarded, a couple of oversized shirts, his school things. It all fit in a small plastic bag. This is all you have? Alastor asked, his perpetual smile tightening slightly. Harry nodded. We'll remedy that soon enough, Alastor murmured. Then louder, now, which room will be Harry's? Dudley's second bedroom, Petunia said faintly, leaning on the wall for support. Excellent. Lead the way, dear boy. Harry climbed the stairs, acutely aware of the demon gliding behind him and the shell-shocked Dursleys watching from below. He pushed open the door to reveal a room cluttered with Dudley's broken and discarded toys, a bent bicycle, a television with a hole punched through the screen, stacks of unread books. Alastor surveyed the chaos. Not ideal, but workable. With a snap of his fingers, the junk vanished, replaced by a tidy bed, desk, and wardrobe. Much better. Where did all Dudley's things go? Harry asked, wide-eyed. Oh, just relocated to a pocket dimension. I might give them back if your cousin learns some manners. Alastor winked. Though I wouldn't count on it. From downstairs came an outraged bellow as Dudley discovered his second bedroom had been reassigned. Mom! Dad! Why is the freak in my room? Where's my stuff? Thundering footsteps pounded up the stairs, and Dudley's round face appeared in the doorway, contorted with rage. He froze when he saw Alastor. Hello, young man. Alastor greeted him cheerfully. I believe we haven't met. I'm your cousin's new mentor. Dudley's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then he turned and fled, wailing for his parents. Alastor chuckled. Not the bravest specimen, is he? No matter. He turned to Harry. Now, my boy, we should begin your first lesson while your relatives adjust to our new arrangement. Lesson? You really meant it about teaching me? Of course. I never joke about potential. Alastor sat cross-legged on the floor, patting the space opposite him. Sit, sit. We'll start with something basic, shadow manipulation. Harry sat across from Alastor, trying to process everything that had happened in the past hour. From imprisoned in his cupboard to having his own room and a demon teacher. Now, Alastor said, shadows are the spaces between light. They exist everywhere but are noticed nowhere. They're the perfect tool for a beginner, subtle, versatile, and ever-present. He raised a hand, and the shadow it cast on the wall stretched and twisted into the shape of a rabbit. Cute, isn't it? Alastor grinned. But shadows can be so much more. The rabbit shadow morphed into something with teeth and claws that made Harry shudder. They can observe, intimidate, even touch the physical world if you're skilled enough. And I can learn to do that? Harry asked. With practice. Try this, hold up your hand and imagine its shadow moving independently of your hand. Harry raised his hand, staring intently at the shadow it cast. Nothing happened. Remember what you felt in the garden, Alastor coached. That frustration, that desire for change. Harry thought about the cupboard, about years of neglect, about watching Dudley open mountains of presents while he got nothing. Anger bubbled up inside him again, and suddenly, the shadow of his hand twitched. Yes. Alastor exclaimed. Again. Harry concentrated harder. The shadow hand lifted slightly off the wall, no longer mimicking his real hand's position. Excellent. You have a natural talent for this. Alastor's voice crackled with excitement. Now try to make it wave. Sweat beaded on Harry's forehead as he focused. The shadow hand jerked, then slowly curled its fingers in a crude wave. Outstanding. Alastor clapped his hands. Most beginners take days to achieve that level of control. You, my boy, have exceptional potential. Pride swelled in Harry's chest, a feeling so foreign it took him a moment to recognize it. Someone was pleased with him. Someone thought he was special. What else can I learn? He asked eagerly. Oh, so much. Alastor's eyes gleamed. Shadow travel, manifestation, even reality manipulation with enough practice. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Master the basics first. For the next hour, Harry practiced moving shadow shapes on the wall, making them grow, shrink, detach, and dance. By the end, he was exhausted but exhilarated. You've done remarkably well for your first lesson, Alastor said, rising to his feet. But I believe we've given your family enough time to adjust for one day. Rest now. Practice your shadow movements when you have privacy. I'll return tomorrow for your next lesson. You're leaving. Harry couldn't keep the disappointment from his voice. Only temporarily, my boy. I have business elsewhere, deals to make, souls to terrify, you know how it is. Alastor's form began to shimmer, becoming less solid. But before I go, would you like to see where I come from? Just a quick peek. Harry nodded eagerly. Very well. Hold tight to your new shadow skills, you'll need them for this little trip. Alastor snapped his fingers, and the room around them seemed to dissolve. Colors inverted, sounds distorted, and Harry felt a pulling sensation behind his navel. Then they were elsewhere. A blood-red sky stretched overhead. Buildings of impossible architecture loomed around them, structures that seemed to defy gravity, with spires that twisted like corkscrews and doorways that opened onto nothing. The air smelled of sulfur and something else, something Harry couldn't identify. Welcome to a small corner of my domain. Alastor announced, spreading his arms wide. What do you think? Harry turned in a slow circle, taking in the bizarre landscape. It's not what I expected. Few things worth experiencing ever are. Alastor chuckled. This is merely a shadow of the true hell, filtered through my own considerable power. The real thing would. He paused, well, let's just say it's not suitable for a field trip just yet. In the distance, strange creatures moved, some humanoid, others decidedly not. None approached them, though several ducked away when they noticed Alastor looking in their direction. "Are they afraid of you?" Harry asked. "Terrified," Alastor said proudly. "As they should be. I've worked hard for my reputation." "What exactly do you do here?" Alastor's grin widened. "I bring entertainment. Chaos. The occasional apocalyptic event." He twirled his microphone staff. "I'm something of a celebrity in these parts." A shadow fell over them, and Harry looked up to see an enormous billboard featuring Alastor's grinning face with the words, "Stay tuned," beneath it in dripping letters. "You're on billboards?" "Among other things. Fame is a curious beast, even in hell." Alastor checked his pocket watch. "Ah, we should return. Too long in this realm might leave an impression on your developing powers. We wouldn't want you turning into a full demon just yet, would we?" Before Harry could ask what "yet" meant, Alastor snapped his fingers again, and the twisted landscape dissolved. They were back in Harry's new bedroom, everything exactly as they'd left it. "Now, rest up." Alastor's form began to fade into shadow. "Tomorrow, we begin in earnest." "Oh, and Harry?" "Yes. If your relatives forget our arrangement, simply call my name 3 times. I'll hear you." With a final static-filled chuckle, Alastor vanished completely, leaving Harry alone in his new room. Harry sat on the bed, his bed, and tried to process everything that had happened. He had a demon mentor. He could do magic, real, actual magic. And for the first time in his life, the Dursleys were afraid of him. Harry smiled. It wasn't quite as wide as Alastor's impossible grin, but it held a hint of the same mischief. The next morning, Harry woke to Aunt Petunia's sharp knock. "Up. Get up," she called, but without the usual venom. Harry opened the door to find her standing there stiffly, her expression caught between habitual disdain and fresh fear. "Breakfast is ready," she said curtly. "Your clothes are in the wash. Wear what you have for now." Harry blinked in surprise. His clothes? Washed? That had never happened before. Downstairs, a place was set for him at the table, another first. Dudley glared at him from behind a mountain of eggs and bacon. Uncle Vernon hid behind his newspaper, refusing to acknowledge Harry's presence. Harry sat down cautiously, half expecting the chair to be pulled out from under him. When nothing happened, he began to eat the food on his plate, a proper portion, not just scraps. "Where's your friend?" Petunia asked tightly, glancing at the shadows as if expecting Alastor to materialize from them. "He had business elsewhere," Harry said. "He'll be back later." Vernon grunted behind his newspaper. Dudley shoveled food into his mouth, still glaring at Harry. "What happened to my stuff?" Dudley demanded. "It's safe," Harry said, remembering what Alastor had told him. "It might come back if you learn some manners." Dudley's face purpled in a remarkable imitation of his father. "Dad! Make him give my things back." Vernon lowered his newspaper slightly. "Quiet, Dudley," he muttered. "But Dad," I said quiet. Vernon's eyes darted nervously to the shadows in the corners of the room. Harry hid a smile behind his glass of juice. This was different. Not having to dodge Dudley's feet under the table. Not being yelled at for existing. Not going hungry. After breakfast, Petunia assigned him chores, but reasonable ones this time. Just dusting the living room and tidying the front garden, not the backbreaking list he usually received. As Harry worked in the garden, he practiced what Alastor had taught him. Subtly, he made the shadow of the hedge stretch and twist. It was harder in broad daylight, but he could still feel the connection, the way the shadows responded to his will. Mrs. Number 7 walked by with her dog and did a double take when the shadow of her poodle seemed to grow extra legs for a moment. Harry quickly released the shadow, suppressing a grin. By afternoon, Harry had finished his chores and retreated to his room, eager for Alastor's return. He didn't have to wait long. The radio on his new desk, a vintage model that definitely hadn't been there before, crackled to life. "Good afternoon, my promising pupil." Alastor's voice emerged from the speakers. "Ready for lesson 2? The shadows in the corner of the room darkened, swirled, and Alastor stepped through as if emerging from a doorway. "You're back," Harry said, unable to contain his excitement. "Indeed I am. And I brought gifts." With a flourish, Alastor produced a stack of books from thin air. Study materials. The books had strange titles like Shadow Manipulation for Beginners and The Whispering Dark, A Child's Guide to Void Magic. "These are unusual," Harry said, flipping through pages filled with diagrams and instructions. "Well, of course they are. You won't find these in your local library." Alastor laughed. "I had them specially translated from demonic script. Much easier on human eyes this way." Harry set the books aside carefully. "What are we learning today?" "Voice projection," Alastor said enthusiastically. "Making your words carry power. Useful for commanding shadows, intimidating enemies, or simply getting attention at crowded dinner parties." Harry remembered how Alastor's voice seemed to fill spaces, how it crackled with energy and commanded attention. "First, posture." Alastor tapped Harry's shoulder with his staff. "Straight back. Chin up. You can't project authority while slouching." Harry straightened his spine, lifting his chin. "Better. Now, breathing. Power comes from the diaphragm, not the throat." Alastor placed a hand on Harry's abdomen. "Feel it? Breathe in deeply, then push the air out from here." Harry practiced breathing as instructed, feeling slightly foolish. "Now, choose a simple phrase and say it with intention. Feel the power behind your words." Harry thought for a moment. "Leave me alone." "Perfect. A command with clear intent. Now say it like you mean it." "Leave me alone," Harry said, trying to put force behind it. "Pathetic." Alastor shook his head. "You're asking, not commanding. Think of it this way, if your cousin was about to hit you, would that weak request stop him?" Harry frowned. "No. Exactly. So make him stop. Command it." Harry closed his eyes, remembering countless times Dudley and his gang had cornered him, hurt him, humiliated him. He felt anger building in his chest. "Leave me alone," he shouted, his voice suddenly deeper, carrying an echo it shouldn't have in the small bedroom. The lights flickered. The radio static intensified. For a split second, Harry's shadow on the wall grew taller, sprouting antler-like protrusions. "Magnificent." Alastor clapped his hands delightedly. "Natural talent, just as I suspected. Try another command." For the next hour, Harry practiced commanding phrases, learning to infuse them with the same power he'd channeled into the shadows. By the end, he could make "stop right there" sound genuinely intimidating, despite his small size and young voice. "You're progressing faster than I anticipated," Alastor said, watching Harry with calculating eyes. "Perhaps we should test your new skills in a practical setting." "What do you mean?" "I mean, my boy, that skills untested are hardly skills at all. When is your cousin usually home from school?" Harry checked the clock. "Any minute now." "Why?" Alastor's grin widened impossibly. "I believe it's time for a practical demonstration. What was that charming game your cousin and his friends enjoyed playing?" "Harry hunting, was it?" "I don't want to hurt Dudley," Harry said quickly. "Hurt him? Of course not." Alastor waved dismissively. "Simply, discourage him from hurting you. Consider it a valuable life lesson for the boy." Before Harry could protest further, the front door slammed downstairs, announcing Dudley's return. Perfect timing. Alastor's form melted into shadow. "I'll be watching, but this test is all yours. Make me proud." Harry hesitated, then walked downstairs. Dudley was in the kitchen, rummaging through the refrigerator. "Hello, Dudley," Harry said. Dudley spun around, a chicken leg already in his mouth. His small eyes narrowed. Without his parents present, some of his courage had returned. "You," he growled, swallowing his mouthful. "Where's your freaky friend, huh? Not here to protect you now." "I don't need protection," Harry said, standing straighter as Alastor had taught him. Dudley laughed. "Yeah, right. Soon as that demon thing is gone for good, things are going back to normal." He stepped toward Harry menacingly. "Dad says we just have to play along for now. Is that right?" Harry felt a flicker of anger. Nothing had changed after all, they were just waiting for a chance to stuff him back in the cupboard. "That's right," Dudley smirked, emboldened by Harry's silence. He jabbed a finger into Harry's chest. "And the first thing I'm going to do is take back my room and all my stuff." Harry felt something shift inside him, the same feeling from the garden when he'd made the hose move, the same feeling when he'd made the shadows obey him. "Step back," he commanded, his voice carrying that unnatural echo. Dudley's eyes widened. He stumbled backward as if pushed, though Harry hadn't touched him. What did you do?" Dudley stammered. The shadows in the kitchen deepened. Harry hadn't consciously called them, but they responded to his emotions, stretching toward Dudley like grasping hands. "I said to leave me alone," Harry continued, his voice still resonating with that strange power. "And I meant it." Dudley backed against the refrigerator. "You can't do this." Dad will what?" Harry took a step forward. The shadows followed, clinging to his feet like loyal pets. "Lock me in the cupboard? Starve me?" They already did all that, and look what happened. For the first time in his life, Harry saw genuine fear in Dudley's eyes, the same fear Harry had felt countless times when cornered by Dudley and his gang. "I don't want to hurt you," Harry said, his voice returning to normal. "I just want to be left alone. Understand?" Dudley nodded frantically. "Good." Harry turned and walked away, the shadows retreating to their natural positions. As he climbed the stairs, he heard soft, static-filled applause. "Bravo!" Alastor's voice whispered from the shadows. "Restraint and intimidation. A masterful performance." Back in his room, Alastor materialized fully, clapping his hands in genuine appreciation. "You've exceeded my expectations, my boy. Using just your voice and a touch of shadow manipulation to assert dominance, no excessive force needed. I couldn't have done it better myself." He paused. "Well, I would have added a bit more flair, perhaps some dramatic lighting effects, but for a beginner. Exemplary." Harry sat on his bed, feeling drained but somehow taller. "I didn't hurt him." "Of course not. That's the beauty of it." Alastor perched on the edge of the desk. "True power isn't about causing pain, it's about never needing to. Fear, respect, a carefully cultivated reputation, these are far more effective tools than brute force." "Is that why the demons fear you?" Harry asked. "Your reputation." Alastor's smile tightened fractionally. "My reputation is well earned, I assure you. But we'll save those stories for when you're a bit older." He clapped his hands together. "Now, shall we continue with your training? I believe you've mastered the basics of voice projection. Let's move on to something more challenging." For the next few weeks, a routine developed. Harry would wake up, eat a proper breakfast, the Dursleys never forgetting Alastor's arrangement, attend school, complete reasonable chores, then spend evenings learning from Alastor. The demon proved to be a demanding but engaging teacher. He taught Harry more advanced shadow manipulation, how to create simple constructs, how to extend his senses through shadows to observe distant places, even how to partially step into the shadow realm for moments of near invisibility. "Remember," Alastor cautioned as Harry practiced slipping his hand into a shadow portal, "too long in the shadows can change you. Always keep track of time. Always have an anchor in this reality. Harry nodded seriously. He'd seen enough of Alastor's world to understand the warning. The strange landscape with its blood-red sky called to something deep inside him, something that both frightened and excited him. The Dursleys maintained a wary distance. Vernon would sometimes mutter under his breath about unnatural arrangements, but a subtle darkening of the shadows was usually enough to silence him. Dudley avoided Harry entirely, going so far as to cross the street if he saw Harry coming. At school, things changed too. Harry's newfound confidence altered how he carried himself. His voice, trained by Alastor to command attention, drew respect even from teachers who had previously overlooked him. When Dudley's gang tried to resume Harry hunting, Harry simply stood his ground, let his shadow grow slightly darker than natural, and said, "That's not happening anymore." They scattered like pigeons. "You're becoming quite the formidable young man," Alastor remarked one evening as they sat in Harry's room, practicing creating a shadow puppet show on the wall. "Soon we'll need to address your magical education beyond shadows." "There's more?" Harry asked, carefully manipulating a shadow wolf to chase a shadow rabbit across the wall. "My dear boy, shadows are merely the beginning. There's elemental manipulation, reality distortion, energy transference, a whole universe of possibilities." Alastor watched the shadow puppets with approval. "But first, we should discuss your heritage." Harry's concentration broke, and the shadow puppets dissolved. "My heritage? Indeed. Did you think your abilities came from nowhere?" Alastor leaned forward. "Your parents, Harry, were witch and wizard, and quite powerful ones at that." "Witch and?" Harry stared. "You mean they could do what I can do?" "Not exactly what you can do, no." Alastor twirled his microphone staff. "What I'm teaching you bridges several magical traditions, including some that are, shall we say, not typically accessible to the living." He grinned. "But your parents had their own impressive abilities, rooted in the magical community that exists parallel to the non-magical world." "There's a magical community?" Harry's mind raced with possibilities. "With others like me?" "Like you, but not like you," Alastor said cryptically. "You're becoming something quite unique, my apprentice. A bridge between worlds." Harry absorbed this information. "Aunt Petunia said my parents died in a car crash." Static crackled around Alastor, his expression momentarily darkening. "Another falsehood from your charming relatives." "No, Harry, your parents were murdered by a powerful dark wizard, one who tried to kill you as well, but somehow failed." Harry's hand unconsciously touched the lightning bolt scar on his forehead. "This is from the failed killing curse, yes. That scar is a fascinating magical artifact in its own right." Alastor peered at it with professional interest. "It creates the most intriguing disturbance in the ethereal plane. We'll explore that more when you're ready." Harry felt lightheaded. His parents had been murdered. By a dark wizard. Who had tried to kill him too. "Why?" he asked. "Why would someone try to kill a baby?" "Ah, the most interesting question." Alastor's eyes gleamed. "There was a prophecy, you see. About a child who would defeat the dark wizard. He tried to eliminate the threat before it could mature." He gestured at Harry. Obviously, his plan backfired spectacularly. "A prophecy about me?" Harry felt the weight of this revelation pressing down on him. "So I'm supposed to defeat this dark wizard?" "Prophecies are tricky things," Alastor said, suddenly serious. "They can be fulfilled in many ways, or avoided altogether with enough knowledge and power." He placed a clawed hand on Harry's shoulder. "Which is precisely why your training is so important. Knowledge is power, my boy, and power determines who writes the ending to the story." Harry nodded slowly, trying to process everything. "What was his name?" "The Dark Wizard." Alastor's grin widened. "Most in the wizarding world fear to speak it. They call him you-know-who, or he who must not be named. Such delicious terror. He leaned close to Harry's ear and whispered, "Lord Voldemort." The name sent a strange jolt through Harry's scar. He gasped, pressing his hand against it. "Fascinating reaction," Alastor observed. "Another mystery to unravel as your training progresses." "Will he come back?" Harry asked. "Try to finish what he started?" "Almost certainly," Alastor said with inappropriate cheerfulness. "Beings of great power rarely stay defeated permanently." "I should know." He laughed at his own joke. "But by then, you'll be ready. My apprentice will be no easy target." Harry squared his shoulders, feeling a strange mixture of fear and determination. "Teach me everything you know." "That's the spirit." Alastor clapped his hands delightedly. "We'll make a formidable force of you yet. But all in good time, mastery can't be rushed." As Harry continued his lessons in the weeks that followed, he felt himself changing. Not just in his growing magical abilities, but in his outlook. The timid boy from the cupboard was fading away, replaced by someone who stood straighter, spoke more confidently, and viewed the world with new eyes. Sometimes, when practicing his shadow manipulation late at night, Harry caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, his green eyes seeming to glow slightly in the darkness, his smile occasionally stretching just a fraction wider than seemed natural. When he pointed this out to Alastor, the demon merely chuckled. "Power leaves its mark, my boy. Nothing to worry about." But Harry wasn't worried. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged somewhere, even if that somewhere straddled the line between the ordinary world and something much stranger. One evening, almost 3 months after Alastor had first appeared in his cupboard, Harry was practicing a particularly difficult shadow technique, creating a semi-solid shadow construct that could interact with physical objects. "Concentrate," Alastor coached as Harry struggled to make his shadow hand lift a pencil from the desk. "Feel the connection between the shadow and the object. Will them to interact." Harry's forehead beaded with sweat as he focused. The shadow hand wavered, then slowly, shakily, closed around the pencil. For a brief moment, it lifted the pencil a half-inch off the desk before losing cohesion. "Progress," Alastor exclaimed. "You're developing faster than any apprentice I've had in centuries." "You've had other apprentices?" Harry asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "A few, here and there," Alastor said vaguely. "None with your potential, however. The combination of your inherent wizarding magic and my teachings is creating something quite unique." Harry smiled at the praise. Then, gathering his courage, he asked something that had been bothering him for weeks. "Alastor, why me? Of all the people you could have chosen, why pick a kid from a cupboard?" Alastor's perpetual smile softened slightly. "An excellent question. Part curiosity, part opportunity, part..." He paused, searching for the right word, recognition, perhaps. Recognition of what? Of potential going to waste. Of power being suppressed rather than nurtured. Alastor twirled his microphone staff thoughtfully. "I sensed your magical outburst from across dimensional boundaries, no small feat. When I investigated, I found a child with extraordinary potential living in conditions that would crush most spirits." His red eyes fixed on Harry. "Yet yours wasn't crushed, was it? Beaten down, perhaps, but still defiant. Still waiting for a chance." Harry thought about the incidents before Alastor, ending up on the school roof, turning his teacher's hair blue. Small acts of defiance against a world that seemed determined to squash him. "I was drawn to that spark," Alastor continued. "And I thought, what might this child become with proper guidance? With someone who sees his value rather than fears it?" His grin widened. "Besides, your situation was simply too entertaining to pass up. The irony of a feared demon lord mentoring a child prophesied to defeat darkness. Absolutely delicious." Harry laughed despite himself. Alastor's honesty, even about his less altruistic motivations, was refreshing after years of Dursley lies. "So what happens next?" Harry asked. Will I go to the same magical school my parents did? Hogwarts? Alastor nodded. I expect so. You'll receive your letter when you turn 11. But by then, you'll have a significant head start on your classmates. He rubbed his hands together gleefully. I can hardly wait to see their faces when they realize what you can do. Will you still be around when I go to Hogwarts? My dear boy. Alastor placed a hand over his heart in mock offense. Did you think I'd abandon my apprentice just when things get interesting? Of course I'll be around. More discreetly, perhaps. Wizarding institutions tend to have tedious rules about extra-dimensional entities, but I wouldn't miss your education for all the souls in hell. Relief washed over Harry. The thought of facing this new world alone had been unsettling. Now, Alastor said briskly, enough sentimental chat. Back to your shadow constructs. I want to see that pencil levitated properly before midnight. Harry grinned and returned to his practice, focusing intently on his shadow hand. This time, when it grasped the pencil, he channeled his will through it more forcefully. The shadow solidified, lifted the pencil a full inch off the desk, and held it there for several seconds before fading. Excellent! Alastor exclaimed. See what a little emotional motivation can accomplish. Now again, with feeling. As Harry continued practicing, he felt something settling inside him, a sense of purpose, of belonging, of potential waiting to be fulfilled. The boy from the cupboard was gone forever. In his place stood the radio demon's apprentice, ready to face whatever came next. Outside the window, unseen by either Harry or Alastor, a tabby cat with unusual markings around its eyes watched the curious scene unfold. After observing for several minutes, it slipped away into the night, carrying troubling news back to a concerned headmaster. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight, in his room at number 4 Privet Drive, Harry Potter practiced shadow magic under the tutelage of one of Hell's most feared demons, and for the first time in his life, felt truly at home. Chapter 2, Shadows and Magic. Focus, Harry. You're letting your mind wander again. Harry snapped back to attention, sweat beading on his forehead as he concentrated on the task at hand. The shadows around him writhed and twisted, forming a sphere of darkness that hovered between his outstretched hands. 2 years of training had changed him, he wasn't that scared 6-year-old anymore. At nearly 9, Harry Potter stood taller, moved with quiet confidence, and rarely flinched at anything. Sorry, he muttered, narrowing his eyes at the shadow sphere. I've almost got it. Alastor circled him, tapping his microphone staff against the floor with each step. Almost isn't good enough when you're facing enemies who won't give you second chances. Now compress it further, imagine squeezing all that darkness into something dense as a diamond. Harry gritted his teeth, his fingers curling as if physically crushing the shadow ball. The sphere shrank, growing darker until it looked like a hole in reality, a perfect circle of absolute blackness. Better. Alastor's perpetual smile widened. Now, release it at the target. With a sharp thrust of his hand, Harry sent the compressed shadow hurtling across the room toward a practice dummy they'd set up. The sphere struck the dummy's chest and exploded outward in tendrils of darkness that wrapped around it like hungry serpents. Within seconds, the dummy was completely engulfed. Magnificent. Alastor clapped his hands, radio static crackling with his excitement. Your control has improved dramatically. 2 years ago, you could barely make your shadow wave. Now look at you. Harry grinned, watching as the shadows slowly retracted from the dummy, slithering back to their natural positions around the room. The surge of power that accompanied shadow manipulation still thrilled him, the feeling that darkness itself responded to his will. They weren't in his bedroom at Privet Drive today. Those sessions had become too limiting as Harry's abilities grew. Instead, they stood in what Alastor called a pocket dimension, a space between spaces that the demon had created specifically for their training. It looked like an abandoned theater with rows of dusty velvet seats facing a stage where Harry now stood. Vintage microphones, radio equipment, and other odds and ends cluttered the wings. The lighting was perpetually dim, perfect for shadow work. "Can we try the portal again?" Harry asked eagerly. "I almost had it last time." Alastor checked his pocket watch. "We have time for one attempt. Remember, shadow walking is significantly more dangerous than manipulation. Lose focus for even a moment and you could end up somewhere unpleasant." I know." Harry had heard the warnings 100 times. Shadow walking, stepping into one shadow and out through another, was advanced magic that even Alastor approached with caution. "Very well. Start with something simple, that shadow to this one." Alastor pointed to a dark patch beneath an old radio cabinet, then to another shadow near his own feet. Harry took a deep breath and approached the first shadow. Over the past 2 years, he'd learned to see shadows differently, not just as absences of light, but as doorways, tools, extensions of himself. This particular shadow seemed to deepen as he approached, responding to his intent. He closed his eyes, focusing on the feeling of the shadow reaching up to envelop him. Cold tendrils wrapped around his ankles, his calves, climbing higher. Harry allowed himself to sink downward, visualizing the destination shadow in his mind. For a moment, he existed everywhere and nowhere, his body dispersed into the darkness between spaces. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Then, with a mental push, he reassembled himself, stepping out of the shadow near Alastor's feet. "I did it!" Harry exclaimed, then swayed dangerously as dizziness overcame him. Alastor steadied him with a clawed hand. "Indeed you did. And without leaving any body parts behind, an improvement over last time." Harry grimaced, remembering the panic when he'd emerged from his last attempt missing 2 fingers. Alastor had helped him pull them back from the shadow realm, but the sensation of having parts of himself scattered across dimensions wasn't something he'd forget anytime soon. "You're progressing faster than anticipated," Alastor remarked, studying Harry with a calculating look. "The shadow walking alone is a feat most couldn't manage after a decade of study, let alone 2 years. "I have a good teacher," Harry replied with a grin. "Flattery will get you everywhere." Alastor laughed, the sound accompanied by canned applause from nowhere. "But it's more than that. Your wizarding heritage combined with my methods is creating something unique." He leaned closer, examining Harry as if seeing something invisible to normal eyes. "The shadows are beginning to recognize you as one of their own." Harry wasn't entirely sure what that meant, but he knew it was significant. Over the past year, he'd noticed subtle changes in himself, how darkness seemed to follow him like an affectionate pet, how his eyes sometimes reflected light in strange ways, how his shadow occasionally moved a fraction before he did. "Is that bad?" he asked. "Bad? No. Merely fascinating." Alastor straightened, twirling his staff. "Though it might be wise to begin incorporating other magical disciplines into your training. Too much specialization can be limiting." "Like what?" "Elemental manipulation, perhaps. Or runic magic. Even some of the more traditional wizarding spells might provide balance." Alastor snapped his fingers, and a door appeared in the middle of the stage. "But those are considerations for another day. I believe it's time for you to return to your mundane life. Your relatives might become suspicious if you're absent too long." Harry snorted. "They never notice when I'm gone." It was true. Under Alastor's arrangement, the Dursleys had settled into a pattern of studious avoidance. They fed him, clothed him adequately, and otherwise pretended he didn't exist. Harry preferred it that way, it gave him freedom to train without interruption. "Nevertheless," Alastor said, opening the door to reveal Harry's bedroom at Privet Drive, "maintaining appearances is important. The wizarding world will come looking for you eventually, and we want them to find exactly what they expect, a normal boy who happens to be a wizard, not a shadow walker trained by a demon." Harry stepped through the door, feeling the subtle shift as he returned to the normal world. His bedroom looked jarringly ordinary after the pocket dimension, just a bed, desk, wardrobe, and bookshelf filled with an odd mix of school books and the special texts Alastor had provided. Same time tomorrow? Harry asked as Alastor prepared to leave. Perhaps. I have some business to attend to in my realm. A rival causing trouble, nothing for you to worry about. Alastor's form began to shimmer as he faded into shadow. Practice your control exercises. And Harry? Yes. Be careful with your shadows in public. Some eyes see more than others. With a final static-filled chuckle, Alastor vanished completely. Harry flopped onto his bed, mentally exhausted from the shadow-walking attempt. Despite his fatigue, pride swelled in his chest. 2 years ago, he'd been a frightened boy locked in a cupboard. Now he could manipulate darkness itself, walk through shadows, and stand his ground against anyone, human or otherwise. School had become almost laughably easy. With Alastor's training in focus and mental discipline, Harry absorbed information like a sponge. His teachers had gone from dismissing him as that troublemaker, to praising his intelligence and quiet confidence. Even Dudley and his gang kept their distance now. There had been one incident, about a year ago, when Dudley had forgotten his fear long enough to shove Harry against a wall at school. Harry had simply smiled, a smile he'd unknowingly modeled after Alastor's, and whispered, "Are you sure that's wise?" The shadows around them had deepened ever so slightly, and Dudley had backed away, white-faced. No one had laid a hand on him since. Harry rolled onto his side, glancing at his alarm clock. Nearly dinner time. He should go downstairs, make an appearance, maintain the illusion of normalcy Alastor insisted upon. As he stood, his reflection in the mirror caught his attention. He paused, studying himself critically. His wild black hair seemed darker than ever, almost absorbing the light around it. His green eyes had an intensity that sometimes startled even him. The lightning bolt scar on his forehead appeared more pronounced, occasionally seeming to shift subtly when he worked with particularly powerful shadow magic. Was Alastor right? Were the shadows changing him? Harry shrugged off the thought and headed downstairs. Dinner was a quiet affair, as usual. Vernon buried his face in a newspaper, Petunia picked at her food while watching a small kitchen TV, and Dudley shoveled food into his mouth with mechanical efficiency. No one spoke to Harry, and he didn't mind. As he ate, the news program on Petunia's TV caught his attention. Another in a series of strange power outages affecting parts of London. Authorities are baffled by the selective nature of these blackouts, which seem to target specific buildings while leaving surrounding areas untouched. Something about the report tickled at Harry's awareness. The way darkness was described as moving almost purposefully from location to location, it sounded like shadow walking on a massive scale. Harry frowned. Could there be others like him? Alastor had never mentioned other apprentices working in the human world. After dinner, Harry returned to his room and practiced the control exercises Alastor had assigned, creating complex shadow shapes, holding them for extended periods, dispelling them instantly on command. Basic training, but essential for more advanced techniques. As he worked, his thoughts kept returning to the news report. If someone else was manipulating shadows in London, he wanted to know who, and why. When sleep finally came, Harry's dreams were strange and fragmented. He stood in a vast, shadowy landscape where technology and darkness merged in unsettling ways. Television screens flickered with static, showing glimpses of a sharp-toothed smile that wasn't Alastor's. A voice, distorted, electronic, whispered from everywhere at once, "So this is Alastor's new pet project. Interesting." Harry woke with a jolt, his heart racing. The shadows in his room seemed agitated, swirling restlessly in the corners. Just a dream, he muttered, but he wasn't entirely convinced. The next day passed in a blur of ordinary school activities. Harry paid just enough attention to maintain his grades while his mind wandered to shadow techniques and the strange dream. By afternoon, he was practically vibrating with impatience, eager to return home and see if Alastor would appear for their scheduled training. But when he reached his room, there was no sign of the radio demon. Harry waited, completing his homework and practicing basic shadow manipulation to pass the time. Hours ticked by with no static-filled greeting, no dramatic entrance. Finally, as night fell, Harry decided to try something potentially risky. Alastor had taught him to send his consciousness through shadows to observe distant places, a technique that was safer than physical shadow walking but required intense concentration. He sat cross-legged on his bed, closed his eyes, and focused on Alastor. They had a connection forged through 2 years of training. That connection should be enough to guide his consciousness to wherever the demon was currently located. The shadows in the room responded to his call, wrapping around him like a cocoon. Harry felt the familiar sensation of his awareness stretching, thinning, extending outward through the network of darkness that connected all shadows everywhere. Images flashed past, countless locations briefly illuminated in his mind's eye as his consciousness traveled. Then suddenly, he felt a pull, a recognition. Alastor. The scene stabilized, and Harry found himself observing what appeared to be a confrontation. Alastor stood in what looked like a vintage broadcasting studio, his usual smile fixed in place but tension evident in his stance. Facing him was another figure, tall, with a television set for a head showing a sharp-toothed digital smile on its screen. "Quite the little protégé you found," the TV-headed figure was saying, his voice the same distorted electronic sound from Harry's dream. "Teaching him to walk in shadows already? Ambitious, even for you, Alastor." "My apprentice is none of your concern, Vox," Alastor replied, his voice carrying that dangerous edge Harry recognized as barely controlled anger. "I suggest you focus on your own tedious technological pursuits and leave my business to me." Vox's screen flickered, showing a laugh. "But your business is so much more interesting. A human child with that much potential? In the mortal realm? You must know others will take notice. Others have the good sense to keep their distance." Alastor twirled his microphone staff casually, but Harry could see the tension in his movement. "You seem to have misplaced yours. Always the threats," Vox sighed digitally. "I'm not here to fight, old friend. Merely to express my interest. Perhaps the boy would benefit from a more modern education. Your radio days are so antiquated." The shadows around Alastor darkened dangerously. "The boy is mine. This is your only warning." Harry felt a surge of pride at Alastor's possessiveness, followed immediately by concern. There was something off about this confrontation. Alastor seemed almost defensive, which wasn't like him at all. Vox must have sensed it too. "Not feeling yourself today, are you?" The TV demon stepped closer. "Could it be that maintaining that connection to your apprentice is draining more power than you expected? Keeping a foothold in the mortal realm, creating training dimensions, teaching a human to use powers he shouldn't have, it's taking a toll, isn't it?" Alastor's smile remained fixed, but Harry saw his grip tighten on his staff. "Your concern is touching, but misplaced. We'll see." Vox's screen showed a wicked grin. "Perhaps I should pay the boy a visit myself. Form my own assessment." That was enough. Harry had heard plenty, and anger surged through him at the threat. Without thinking, he pushed harder through the shadow connection, no longer content with merely observing. To his shock, and apparently everyone else's, a shadow version of himself began to materialize in the broadcasting studio. Not his physical body, but a dark silhouette with glowing green eyes. "I don't need your assessment," Harry's shadow self said, his voice echoing strangely. "I have a teacher already." Vox actually took a step back, his screen flickering in surprise. Well, well. The pupil arrives to defend his master. How sickeningly loyal." Alastor's expression was unreadable, even to Harry who had learned to interpret the demon's micro-expressions. "Harry," he said calmly, "this is an impressive display of shadow projection, but perhaps not the wisest moment for experimentation." "He threatened to come after me," Harry's shadow replied. "I wanted to see what I was dealing with." He turned his glowing gaze to Vox. "Not impressed so far." Vox's screen flashed with anger. Brave words from a child hiding behind a shadow puppet. "Come visit in person, boy. I'll show you what real power looks like." Enough. Alastor stepped between them, shadows writhing around him. Harry, return home. Now. Vox and I have business to conclude. Harry hesitated, suddenly unsure. Was Alastor truly weakened from maintaining their connection? Should he stay? Now, Harry, Alastor repeated, and this time there was no arguing with his tone. Harry reluctantly withdrew his consciousness, the shadow projection dissolving as he pulled back through the darkness. With a gasp, he returned fully to his body in his bedroom, feeling drained from the unexpected extension of the observation technique. He lay back on his bed, mind racing. Vox was clearly a threat, and not just to Harry. The demon had suggested Alastor was weakened from maintaining their connection. Was that true? Had Harry been inadvertently draining his mentor's power all this time? The thought was troubling enough that Harry barely slept that night, waiting for Alastor to appear with an explanation. But morning came with no sign of the radio demon. School was torture that day. Harry couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything except the confrontation he'd witnessed and Alastor's continued absence. By afternoon, worry had transformed into determination. If Alastor wouldn't come to him, perhaps he needed to go to Alastor. Back in his room, Harry prepared for his most ambitious attempt at shadow walking yet, a deliberate journey to Alastor's realm. He'd visited before, but always with Alastor guiding him, never alone. He closed his eyes, focusing on the largest shadow in his room, the dark space beneath his bed. It deepened as he approached, responding to his intent. "Here goes nothing," Harry muttered, then stepped into the darkness. The sensation of dispersion was more intense than ever, his consciousness scattered across multiple planes of existence. For a terrifying moment, Harry thought he'd made a fatal mistake. Then he remembered Alastor's lessons on focus, on maintaining a mental image of his destination. He pictured the broadcasting studio where he'd seen Alastor and Vox, clutching that image like a lifeline as darkness swirled around him. The transition was rough, like being squeezed through a tube too small for his body, but suddenly Harry found himself stumbling out of a shadow in what looked like the right place. The vintage studio equipment was there, the Art Deco design elements, but no sign of either demon. "Alastor?" Harry called out, his voice sounding small in the cavernous space. No answer. Harry moved cautiously through the studio, trailing his fingers along dusty control panels and microphone stands. The place felt abandoned, though it had clearly been active during the confrontation he'd witnessed. A soft crackling sound, like radio static, drew his attention to a door at the far end of the room. Harry approached carefully, pushing it open to reveal a long corridor lined with doors. Each door looked different, some wooden, some metal, one made entirely of what appeared to be solidified shadow. The static sound grew louder, coming from behind the shadow door. Harry steeled himself and reached for the handle. As his fingers touched the dark surface, voices became audible through the static. "Can't maintain this pace," someone was saying, not Alastor, not Vox, a voice Harry didn't recognize. The connection to the mortal realm, the pocket dimensions, the power transfers to the boy, "It's too much, even for you." "I appreciate your concern, Rosie," came Alastor's voice, sounding tired in a way Harry had never heard before, "but I've calculated the risks. The investment will pay dividends." "Investment?" the female voice asked. "Is that all he is to you?" A pause. "He was, initially." Harry held his breath, straining to hear. "And now?" Rosie prompted. Another pause. "He's surpassed expectations. His adaptability, his natural affinity for shadow work, he's accomplished in 2 years what took me decades." "You're avoiding my question, old friend." Alastor's sigh was audible even through the static. "The boy has become important. Beyond his potential utility." "You care for him," Rosie said, not a question. "An unfortunate development," Alastor replied dryly. "Caring creates vulnerabilities. Vox already senses it. Vox is a problem you should address before bringing the boy deeper into our world." "Agreed. Which is why," Alastor stopped suddenly. The static increased sharply, then cleared. "We have a visitor." Harry barely had time to step back before the shadow door swung open, revealing Alastor, looking exactly as usual in his red pinstriped suit, perpetual smile in place, though his eyes narrowed when he saw Harry. "Well, well. What an unexpected surprise," Alastor said, his voice carrying its usual cheer despite the tension Harry could sense beneath it. "My apprentice, making unsupervised interdimensional trips. I'm not sure whether to be impressed or concerned." Behind him stood a female demon with pale skin, dark eyes, and hair styled in a 1920s fashion. She regarded Harry with open curiosity. "So this is the famous Apprentice," she said, stepping forward to circle Harry appraisingly. "He doesn't look like much." "Neither did I, at first," Alastor countered. "Harry, meet Rosie, an old associate of mine." "Rosie, Harry Potter." "Charmed," Rosie said, though she didn't sound it. "You're causing quite a stir down here, you know. A human child learning shadow walking. Unprecedented." Harry found his voice. "I heard about Vox. I was worried. Eavesdropping as well as shadow walking." Alastor's grin widened, but there was a dangerous edge to it. "My dear boy, you're developing habits that would make me proud under different circumstances. However, the timing leaves something to be desired." "Is it true?" Harry asked bluntly. "Are you getting weaker because of teaching me?" Alastor and Rosie exchanged glances. "Not weaker," Alastor said carefully. "Merely, allocating resources differently. Maintaining connections between realms requires energy, which means less available for other purposes." "So I am draining you," Harry said, shoulders slumping. "Don't be dramatic," Alastor waved dismissively. "It's a temporary condition. Once you're fully trained, the power balance will shift. Your abilities will actually enhance mine, creating a mutually beneficial arrangement." "If you survive that long," Rosie muttered. "Always the optimist, Rosie dear." Alastor laughed, though it sounded forced. "Now, Harry, while I appreciate your concern, you really shouldn't be here unsupervised. Let me escort you home." "But what about Vox? He threatened to come after me." "An empty threat, for now," Alastor assured him. "Vox is dangerous, but not foolish enough to challenge me directly on my own turf." Harry wasn't convinced. "He seemed to think you were vulnerable." Wishful thinking on his part. Alastor placed a hand on Harry's shoulder, guiding him back toward the broadcasting studio. "Now, shall we return you to the mortal realm before your absence is noticed?" Harry reluctantly allowed himself to be led away, glancing back at Rosie, who watched them with an unreadable expression. Once they were alone in the studio, Alastor's smile slipped fractionally. "That was extremely reckless, Harry. Shadow walking between realms without guidance could have scattered your essence across a dozen dimensions." "I was worried," Harry repeated stubbornly. "You didn't show up for training, and after seeing Vox threaten me?" Alastor laughed genuinely this time. "My dear boy, Vox has been making threats for decades. It's practically our form of greeting. He said you were weakened. And you believed him?" Alastor shook his head. "I thought I taught you better than to trust a demon's words at face value." Harry felt a flicker of irritation. "I heard what you told Rosie. About allocating resources. About being vulnerable." Alastor's expression sharpened. "Eavesdropping is becoming a habit with you. Stop avoiding the question. Am I putting you in danger by being your apprentice?" For a long moment, Alastor said nothing. Then he sighed, a surprisingly human sound from the demon. "All worthwhile endeavors involve risk, Harry. Yes, maintaining our connection requires power. Yes, that power could be used elsewhere. And yes, Vox and others may see it as a weakness to exploit." He straightened, his smile returning to full force. "But the potential rewards far outweigh those concerns. You are becoming something extraordinary, my boy, something neither fully human nor demon, with access to powers from multiple magical traditions. But if it's hurting you, it isn't hurting me, Alastor interrupted firmly. It's simply requiring adjustments. Adaptation. Something we demons don't always excel at. He patted Harry's head. Your concern is, touching, if unnecessary. Harry wasn't entirely convinced, but he recognized Alastor's tone. The discussion was over. Now, Alastor said briskly, let's get you home. And perhaps we should discuss expanding your training beyond shadows. Diversification might be prudent, given recent developments. With a snap of his fingers, Alastor opened a portal directly to Harry's bedroom. Unlike Harry's rough shadow walking, this transition was smooth and instantaneous. Rest, Alastor instructed as they arrived back in the mortal realm. That unsupervised shadow walk likely drained you more than you realize. We'll resume training tomorrow, with some new additions to the curriculum. Harry nodded, suddenly aware of the bone-deep exhaustion pulling at him. You promise you're okay? My dear boy, Alastor's voice softened slightly, I've survived far worse than an ambitious TV demon with delusions of grandeur. Your concern, while unnecessary, is appreciated. With that uncharacteristically gentle reassurance, Alastor faded back into the shadows, leaving Harry alone with his thoughts. The next few weeks brought significant changes to Harry's training regime. Alastor introduced elements of traditional wizarding magic, teaching Harry to channel his power through focused intent rather than relying solely on shadow manipulation. The wizarding world uses wands, Alastor explained during one session, but the wand is merely a focus. The power comes from within. You've been accessing that power directly through shadow work. Now we'll refine it for other applications. They practiced in the pocket dimension, Alastor creating targets that Harry attempted to affect through concentrated will alone. At first, it was frustratingly difficult compared to shadow manipulation. Harry could make darkness dance with a thought but struggled to light a candle with direct magical intent. Different magical muscles, Alastor explained patiently. You've been exercising one set extensively while neglecting others. Balance is key to true mastery. Gradually, Harry improved. By his 9th birthday, he could perform simple wizarding spells without shadows as intermediaries, lighting candles, moving small objects, even creating brief shields of pure magical energy. When you eventually receive a wand, Alastor told him, these skills will make you exceptionally powerful. Most wizarding children rely entirely on their wands as crutches, you'll have alternatives they can't imagine. Life at Privet Drive continued in its strange new normal. The Dursleys maintained their distance, providing Harry's basic needs while otherwise pretending he didn't exist. School remained unchallenging academically but provided necessary social camouflage. Harry made no close friends but wasn't actively targeted anymore either. Most children sensed something different about him and kept a respectful distance. It was during a rare solo excursion, a walk through a wooded park several neighborhoods away from Privet Drive, that Harry encountered something unexpected. He was practicing subtle shadow manipulation, making leaf shadows dance slightly out of sync with the actual leaves, when he noticed he was being watched. A girl about his age with waist-length blonde hair and protuberant silver eyes was observing him from a nearby clearing. She wore a sundress with what appeared to be bottle caps sewn around the hem and radish-shaped earrings. Harry immediately stopped his shadow practice, but the girl smiled dreamily. "Don't stop on my account," she said in a sing-song voice. "It's quite beautiful, the way you make the shadows dance." Harry tensed. No one had ever noticed his subtle shadow work before. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The shadows," she gestured vaguely around them. "They like you. I can see them reaching for you even when you're not calling them." She tilted her head. "That's unusual. Shadows typically avoid wizards. Too much light energy." Harry stared at her, speechless. Not only had she seen his shadow manipulation, but she had casually mentioned wizards as if discussing the weather. "You're from a magical family," he said finally, not a question. "Oh yes, the girl nodded serenely. The love goods. I'm Luna. She studied him with unnerving intensity. And you're Harry Potter. You have a lightning scar, though it's trying to hide beneath your hair. Harry's hand automatically went to his forehead. How did you? Everyone in the wizarding world knows about you, Luna said matter-of-factly. The boy who lived. Though none of the stories mention your affinity for shadows. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Or your demon friend. Harry felt a chill. My what? The radio entity that follows you, Luna said, as if it were perfectly obvious. I can't see him directly, but his interference patterns are distinctive. Daddy writes about interdimensional beings in the Quibbler. They're quite rare in our plane. For perhaps the first time since meeting Alastor, Harry felt completely out of his depth. This strange girl talked about demons and interdimensional beings as casually as others might discuss the weather. You can see all that? He asked finally. Luna nodded. Mummy's experimental spells had some unusual side effects on my perception. I see things others miss. She sat down on a nearby log, patting the space beside her. Would you like to hear about Crumplehorn Snorkax while your shadow friend isn't listening? Against his better judgment, Harry sat beside her. He's not listening. Not right now. His attention is elsewhere, probably that television entity that's been causing disturbances in London. They have history, you know. Decades of rivalry. Harry stared at her. Who are you? I told you. Luna Lovegood. She blinked owlishly. Though I suppose you're asking in a broader existential sense, in which case I'm not entirely sure. Are any of us who we think we are? Despite himself, Harry laughed. There was something refreshing about Luna's strange directness. You're not afraid of me? He asked. Knowing about my shadow friend? Should I be? Luna asked with genuine curiosity. You don't feel dangerous. Different, yes. But not malicious. Most people avoid me. Most people avoid me too, Luna said cheerfully. They think I'm strange. Are you? Oh, definitely, she nodded seriously. But so are you, so we're well matched. Harry found he couldn't argue with that logic. Their conversation meandered through topics both mundane and bizarre, Luna explaining aspects of wizarding society Harry hadn't learned from Alastor, Harry carefully avoiding details about his training while still satisfying Luna's curiosity about shadow magic. The Ministry monitors underage magic, Luna explained at one point, but they can only detect wand-based spells and major accidental magic. Shadow manipulation exists in a blind spot, it's not technically wizarding magic at all. That's useful to know, Harry said, filing the information away. You should be careful though, Luna added. People are noticing. There have been more owls flying over Little Whinging lately. Wizarding owls, carrying messages. About me? Probably. You're making ripples. Luna picked a dandelion and blew the seeds into the air. Ripples attract attention. Harry watched the dandelion seeds catch the breeze. What kind of attention? Dumbledore, 4-1. He's the Hogwarts headmaster. Very powerful, very observant. Luna twirled another dandelion. There are rumors he has your house monitored. Harry tensed. Monitored? How? Magic leaves traces, Luna said vaguely. Especially unusual magic. Your shadow friend has been very active around your home. Harry made a mental note to discuss this with Alastor. If wizards were watching Privet Drive, they needed to be more careful. As the afternoon waned, Luna stood to leave. This was nice. Most people don't listen to me for so long without calling me loony. I enjoyed it too, Harry said, surprised to find it was true. Will you be here again sometime? Perhaps. I visit my cousin in Little Whinging occasionally. Luna studied him with those disconcerting silver eyes. Be careful with the shadows, Harry Potter. They're changing you. What do you mean? But Luna just smiled enigmatically and skipped away through the trees, her bottle-cap-trimmed dress catching the late afternoon sunlight. Harry watched her go, feeling unsettled. First Alastor's comments about shadows recognizing him as their own, now Luna's warning that they were changing him. What exactly was happening to him? That evening, when Alastor appeared for their scheduled training, Harry immediately told him about Luna. A love good, you say? Alastor tapped his chin thoughtfully. Interesting. That family has a reputation for seeing beyond normal perception. Not always accurately, but often enough to be concerning. She knew about you, Harry said. Called you a radio entity. And she mentioned Vox, the TV disturbances in London. Most troubling, Alastor murmured. If a child can perceive so much, more powerful wizards might as well. She said Dumbledore has this house monitored. That got Alastor's full attention. Did she now? Well, that complicates matters. He paced the room, shadows swirling around his feet. We may need to adjust our approach. Accelerate certain aspects of your training while scaling back the more detectable activities. Luna also said something about the shadows changing me. You've mentioned that before too. What does it mean? Alastor stopped pacing, studying Harry with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. Magic changes its wielder, Harry. All magic, not just shadows. Wizards who specialize in particular branches often develop characteristics reflecting their focus. Spend decades working with fire magic, you might become resistant to burns. Dedicate yourself to mind arts, your thoughts might become more structured, compartmentalized. And shadow magic? Shadow magic is particularly transformative, Alastor admitted. It exists at the boundary between realities. Working with it extensively blurs your own boundaries somewhat. Blurs them how? Harry pressed. Alastor sighed. You've noticed small changes already. The way shadows respond to you even when you're not deliberately manipulating them. The slight glow in your eyes in darkness. The occasional echo in your voice when you're channeling significant power. Harry nodded slowly. All these things had happened, gradually increasing over time. These are surface manifestations of deeper changes, Alastor continued. Your magical core is adapting, developing affinities that most humans, even wizards, never experience. You're becoming more attuned to the spaces between worlds. More resonant with the frequencies I exist on. Is that dangerous? Not inherently. It makes you more powerful, more versatile. Alastor hesitated, uncharacteristically. But it may also make you less conventionally human over time. Harry absorbed this. Is that why you wanted to diversify my training? To slow these changes? Partly, Alastor nodded. Balance is important. Too much specialization in any magical discipline can lead to complications. He clapped his hands suddenly, dispelling the serious mood. But enough gloomy talk. We have work to do. Especially if Dumbledore is indeed watching this house. Their training that day focused on magical concealment, techniques to mask power usage from detection. Wizarding monitoring is primarily designed to detect active spellcasting, Alastor explained. Passive abilities, like simply sensing shadows or seeing in darkness, leave minimal magical signatures. Focus on those when you might be observed. Harry practiced creating layers of shadow that could hide his magical activities, essentially working within a bubble of darkness that contained any detectable energy. As they worked, Harry thought about Luna's warnings and Alastor's admissions. He was changing, becoming something neither fully human nor demon. The thought should have frightened him, but instead, he felt a strange excitement. He was unique, special in ways even other wizards weren't. Little did he know how soon those unique abilities would be tested. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later. Harry woke in the middle of the night to find the shadows in his room agitated, writhing as if in pain. The temperature had dropped dramatically, frost forming on the inside of his window despite it being summer. Harry sat up, instantly alert. Alastor? No response, but the shadows continued their unnatural movement, stretching toward him as if seeking protection. Something was very wrong. Harry slipped out of bed and went to the window. Outside, the normally quiet street was unnaturally dark, even the street lamps seemed dimmed, their light struggling against an encroaching darkness that wasn't natural shadow. Movement caught his eye, a figure standing directly beneath the streetlight nearest the Dursleys' house. Too tall to be human, too thin, with an oddly angled head that. Harry's breath caught. The figure had a television for a head. Vox. The TV demon seemed to sense Harry's gaze. The screen turned upward, and even from this distance, Harry could see the malicious grin displayed on it. Vox raised a hand in mocking salute, then gestured toward the shadows surrounding him. They began to churn more violently, rising up like a wave. Harry stumbled back from the window as darkness crashed against the house, seeping through cracks around the window frame like black water. These weren't normal shadows, they felt wrong, tainted, hostile. He needed help. Alastor. Harry called out, remembering the demon's instruction to call his name 3 times if in danger. Alastor. Alastor. Static filled the room, but instead of Alastor's familiar presence, a distorted electronic voice emerged from Harry's alarm clock. I'm afraid your mentor is indisposed at the moment, Vox's voice crackled through the speaker. Something about a territorial dispute in the deeper circles. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? The corrupted shadows continued pouring into the room, forming into grotesque shapes, grasping hands, snapping jaws, writhing tentacles. What do you want? Harry demanded, backing toward the far wall. Just a friendly visit. Vox's laughter distorted the clock speaker. I wanted to see Alastor's famous apprentice for myself. Assess your potential. Maybe offer an alternative education. I'm not interested, Harry said firmly, gathering his own shadow power. The darkness around his feet solidified, pushing back against Vox's corrupted shadows. Bold words from such a small package, Vox's voice mocked. But you haven't seen what I can offer. Technology and darkness, my boy. The future, not Alastor's dusty past. The corrupted shadows surged forward again. Harry threw up a shield of his own shadow energy, creating a dome of darkness around himself. Vox's shadows slammed against it, searching for weaknesses. Harry gritted his teeth, struggling to maintain the shield. He'd never faced opposition like this before, shadow fighting shadow, darkness against darkness. It was like trying to hold back a flood with a paper dam. Impressive resistance, Vox sounded genuinely surprised. But futile. Your training is incomplete. You lack the fundamentals of true shadow combat. A tendril of corrupted shadow pierced Harry's shield, wrapping around his ankle. Cold like he'd never felt before shot up his leg, numbing it instantly. Harry panicked, lashing out with raw power. His own shadows responded with unusual force, slicing through Vox's tendril and temporarily reinforcing his shield. But more tendrils were breaking through, and Harry knew he couldn't maintain this defense much longer. He needed to escape, to find help. Shadow walking was risky, especially under pressure, but Harry saw no alternative. Concentrating fiercely, he tried to open a shadow portal beneath his feet, a escape route to Alastor's pocket dimension, where he might be safer. The portal began to form, darkness deepening beneath him, but Vox's laughter increased. Amateur move, child. Shadow walking while under attack. Let me show you why that's a mistake. Suddenly, Vox's corrupted shadows surged into Harry's forming portal, contaminating it. The escape route twisted, its destination scrambling. Harry felt himself sinking into the shadows, but he no longer controlled where they led. Panic overwhelmed him as darkness enveloped him completely. He was falling, scattering, his consciousness fragmenting across multiple planes. This was exactly what Alastor had warned against, an unstable shadow walk that could disperse his essence beyond recovery. In desperation, Harry focused on the one constant in his magical education, Alastor's broadcasting studio, the heart of the radio demon's power. He pictured it with every ounce of his concentration, clinging to the image as his body disintegrated into the darkness. Impact. Pain. Solidity. Harry gasped, finding himself sprawled on a familiar hardwood floor. He'd made it to the broadcasting studio, but something was wrong. The usual vintage equipment was damaged, control panels sparking, microphones bent. Signs of a struggle were everywhere. And in the center of the room, slumped against a destroyed console, was Alastor. The demon looked diminished somehow, his usual vibrant coloring faded, his smile strained, his eyes dimmer than usual. He struggled to sit upright when he saw Harry. "My boy," Alastor coughed, static interrupting his voice, "your timing is impeccable, though I wish the circumstances were better." Harry scrambled to his feet, rushing to Alastor's side. "What happened?" "Vox attacked me at Privet Drive, and when I tried to escape." "Vox," Alastor growled, the name distorted by interference. "Should have anticipated his move. He arranged a distraction, sent several lesser demons to challenge my territory while he went after you. He attempted to stand but faltered. I dealt with them, but it drained resources I couldn't spare." "You're hurt," Harry said, noting the shadows around Alastor seemed thin, lacking their usual substance. "Merely temporarily diminished," Alastor waved dismissively, though the effort clearly cost him. "My connection to the mortal realm was stressed by the simultaneous defense of my territory here. Vox used that vulnerability. I need to get you help." Harry looked around frantically. "Where's Rosie? Or anyone else who—" "No time," Alastor interrupted. "Vox will trace your shadow walk. He'll be here soon. But you can't fight like this." "Indeed not," Alastor's smile widened despite his weakened state. "Which is why we need a different approach." He gripped Harry's shoulder. "I need to replenish my power quickly. For that, I require a conduit, something to channel energy through." "What kind of conduit?" "You, my apprentice." Alastor's eyes glowed briefly brighter. "Our connection works both ways. I've been feeding power to you for years. Now, you can return the favor." Harry nodded immediately. "Tell me what to do." "It's dangerous," Alastor warned. "Channeling power back to me could leave you vulnerable, especially given your incomplete training." "I don't care," Harry said firmly. "Just tell me how." Alastor's grin softened into something almost fond. "You continue to surprise me, my boy." He straightened as much as he could. "Place your hands in mine. Focus on the shadow connection between us, the one that's existed since our first meeting. Visualize it as a conduit, then open yourself to it fully." Harry took Alastor's clawed hands in his own, closed his eyes, and concentrated. He could feel it, the thread of darkness that had bound them for years, usually carrying power and knowledge from Alastor to him. Now he needed to reverse the flow. "That's it," Alastor encouraged, his voice stronger already. "Feel the connection. Now imagine your power, all that lovely shadow energy you've cultivated, flowing back to its source." Harry focused harder, imagining his power as a dark river changing direction. It was difficult, like trying to make water flow uphill. His instincts fought against it. "More," Alastor urged. "Don't hold back, Harry. I need everything you can give." Harry released his mental restraints, allowing his power to flow freely toward Alastor. Immediately, he felt the drain, his strength ebbing, his consciousness dimming at the edges. It was like giving blood, but something more fundamental than blood was leaving him. Alastor's form began to solidify, the colors of his suit brightening, his antlers growing more defined. His smile widened to its normal impossible breadth. "Yes," the radio demon exclaimed, voice returning to its usual crisp broadcast quality. "Magnificent, my boy. Such power you've developed." Harry swayed, his vision tunneling. He'd given too much too quickly, and darkness, not the kind he could control, was creeping in at the edges of his awareness. "Alastor," he gasped. "I can't, just a bit more," Alastor urged, his grip on Harry's hands tightening. "We're almost." The studio door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and twisted metal. "How touching," Vox's electronic voice filled the room. "The apprentice sacrificing himself for his master. I'm almost moved." The TV demon stepped through the ruined doorway, electricity crackling around his suited form. "Almost, but not quite." Alastor released Harry's hands, standing to his full height. Though not completely restored, he looked far more formidable than moments before. "Your timing has always been impeccable, Vox," Alastor's voice carried its usual cheery menace. "Though your manners leave much to be desired. Attacking a child. Breaking down my door. Most uncouth. Spare me the moral outrage," Vox's screen displayed a sneer. "We both know the boy is no ordinary child. What he's becoming under your tutelage is a violation of several interdimensional treaties. Treaties you yourself have broken repeatedly," Alastor countered, positioning himself between Harry and Vox. "Besides, young Harry is a special case. His natural magical heritage combined with certain, unique circumstances of his infancy make him exempt from standard classifications." Harry tried to stand, to help somehow, but his legs wouldn't support him. He'd given Alastor too much of his energy. Vox noticed his struggle. "Look at your apprentice, Alastor. Drained to the point of collapse, and for what? So you can fight your old rival again? How many times must we dance this dance?" "As many as it takes for you to learn your place," Alastor replied, shadows beginning to writhe around him once more. "Now, shall we take this discussion elsewhere? The boy has no part in our professional disagreements. On the contrary," Vox stepped closer, "he's become central to them. A human child with demon-level shadow manipulation. The potential is too valuable to leave in your antiquated hands." Harry managed to pull himself to a sitting position, leaning against a damaged console. Despite his exhaustion, anger flared within him. He was not some prize to be fought over. "I chose Alastor," he said, his voice weak but determined. "Not you. Not ever you." Vox's screen flickered to show a laughing face. "As if a child knows what's best for his own development. You chose the first mentor who offered, boy. You know nothing of the possibilities." "I know enough," Harry countered, struggling to his feet at last. "I know Alastor never attacked me in my home. Never tried to corrupt my shadow walking. Never called me a prize to be won." Something flickered across Vox's screen, surprise, perhaps, at Harry's defiance despite his weakened state. Alastor chuckled. "You see. The boy has discernment. Now, for the final time, take your leave. You've caused enough damage for one evening." "Or what?" Vox challenged. "You're still weakened, Alastor. The boy's energy transfusion barely restored you to fighting capacity. And he's in no condition to assist." Harry felt a surge of frustration. Vox was right, he'd given Alastor what energy he could spare, but it might not be enough. If only there were more power available, some reserve he could tap into. And then he remembered something Alastor had mentioned months ago, something about his scar being a fascinating magical artifact that created disturbances in the ethereal plane. Without fully understanding why, Harry reached up and pressed his palm against his lightning bolt scar. It felt hot to the touch, pulsing with some energy that wasn't quite his own. "Alastor," he called weakly. "There's power in my scar. You said so yourself. Can you use it?" Alastor glanced back, his eyes widening slightly. "Harry, that energy is complicated. Potentially dangerous. More dangerous than him." Harry nodded toward Vox, who was watching their exchange with visible curiosity. Alastor hesitated only a moment. "Point taken." The radio demon stepped back toward Harry, placing one clawed hand over Harry's where it pressed against the scar. Immediately, both of them gasped as energy surged between them, wild, angry, foreign energy that burned like fire rather than flowing like shadow. Vox took a step backward. "What are you doing, Alastor?" "That energy signature is none of your concern," Alastor snapped, his form swelling with new power. The shadows around him darkened impossibly, taking on a reddish hue that Harry had never seen before. Harry felt the strange energy draining from his scar, flowing into Alastor. Unlike giving his own power, this didn't weaken him. If anything, he felt lighter, clearer, as the foreign energy departed. Alastor straightened to his full height, antlers extending, eyes blazing crimson. His radio static grew louder, interspersed with unfamiliar sounds, hissing voices, distant screams. Now then, Alastor's voice resonated with new depths. "Where were we?" Vox's scream showed alarm. "This isn't worth the trouble," he said, backing toward the door. "Keep your pet project, Alastor. For now." "Oh no," Alastor's grin was terrifying even to Harry. "You initiated this confrontation. It would be rude not to conclude it properly." With a gesture, Alastor sent a wave of shadow, darker and more substantial than anything Harry had ever seen him produce, crashing toward Vox. The TV demon tried to counter with his own electronic-infused darkness, but Alastor's empowered shadows overwhelmed him. Vox was slammed against the far wall, his screen cracking slightly. "This isn't over," he hissed through static. "It never is," Alastor replied cheerfully, striding forward. "But let this serve as a reminder of why your ambitions should be directed elsewhere. The boy is mine to teach. Privet Drive is under my protection. Violate either again, and our next conversation will be considerably less civilized." With a final furious glare from his screen, Vox dissolved into electronic static and vanished. The moment he was gone, Alastor turned back to Harry, his form gradually returning to its normal proportions as he released the excess energy. "Well," he said brightly. "That was invigorating. Are you all right, my boy?" Harry nodded, though he felt drained and shaky. "What was that?" "The energy in my scar." Alastor's expression turned calculating. "Something we'll discuss when you're rested. For now, let's return you home before your absence is noticed." "But Vox won't trouble you again anytime soon," Alastor assured him. "He's many things, but foolish isn't one of them. He knows when he's outmatched." Harry wanted to press further, but exhaustion was overwhelming him. Alastor seemed to notice, creating a shadow portal with a casual gesture. "Home you go, my brave apprentice. Rest. Recover. We'll talk tomorrow." Too tired to argue, Harry stepped through the portal and found himself back in his bedroom at Privet Drive. The corrupted shadows were gone, everything seemingly back to normal. As if nothing had happened. He collapsed onto his bed, questions swirling in his mind. What was the energy in his scar? Why had Alastor been so reluctant to use it? Why had it affected the demon so dramatically? Sleep claimed him before he could find answers, and his dreams were troubled, filled with high, cold laughter and flashes of green light. The next morning, Harry woke to find a tabby cat with unusual markings around its eyes sitting on his windowsill, watching him intently. When he approached the window, the cat leapt down and disappeared around the corner of the house. Strange, but after last night's events, hardly worth noting. Harry went through his day mechanically, waiting for evening when Alastor would presumably return with explanations. School, chores, dinner, all passed in a blur. When he finally returned to his room and closed the door, Harry was surprised to find not Alastor waiting for him, but a letter on his pillow. The parchment was thick, expensive-looking, and sealed with red wax bearing an ornate A. Harry broke the seal and read, "My ambitious apprentice, circumstances require my attention elsewhere for a few days. Last night's events have stirred up certain entities who take an interest in interdimensional power fluctuations. Best to let things settle. More pressingly, the wizarding world has taken notice. The cat watching your window this morning was no ordinary feline, but an animagus, a witch capable of animal transformation. Almost certainly sent by Dumbledore to investigate the magical disturbance Vox caused. Be exceptionally careful until my return. Practice only your most subtle skills. Avoid shadow walking entirely. If questioned by any wizards, know as little as possible. We have much to discuss when I return, including the nature of that fascinating scar of yours. It seems to contain energy that is neither fully human nor demon, but something uniquely dark. Your dedicated mentor, Alastor P.S. Your actions last night were both foolish and impressively loyal. Few would offer their power so freely to a demon. Your trust is noted and appreciated. Harry read the letter twice, then watched as it dissolved into shadow, leaving no evidence behind. Wizards were watching the house. Alastor was gone for days. And his scar contained uniquely dark energy. Harry touched the lightning bolt mark thoughtfully. It had never seemed particularly special, just a souvenir of the car crash that wasn't actually a car crash. But now, knowing it was connected to the dark wizard who had murdered his parents, who had tried to kill him as an infant, he needed to know more. But with Alastor temporarily absent and wizards potentially monitoring the house, Harry's options were limited. The next few days passed in tense caution. Harry went through the motions of normal life while keeping vigilant watch for anything unusual. The tabby cat appeared occasionally, always watching from a distance. Twice, Harry noticed an old woman he'd never seen before walking past the house, peering at it with unusual intensity. He limited his magic to the most subtle forms, extending his senses slightly into nearby shadows to maintain awareness of his surroundings, practicing mental focus exercises, reviewing the theoretical texts Alastor had provided. It was during one of these study sessions, nearly a week after Vox's attack, that Harry's attention was drawn to an unusual sound from downstairs, the sound of the Dursleys speaking politely to someone. The Dursleys didn't have visitors they were polite to. Respectful, fawning, sycophantic with those they wanted to impress, yes. But genuinely polite? Never. Harry slipped to his door, cracking it open to listen. Completely unexpected honor, Professor, Vernon was saying, his voice strained with forced courtesy. Though I'm not sure what interest you would have in our household. I assure you, Mr. Dursley, this is a routine visit, replied an elderly female voice with a Scottish accent. Hogwarts likes to make early connections with potential students, especially in cases where the family might not be familiar with our institution. Hogwarts. The wizarding school Alastor had mentioned. Harry's heart raced. Now see here, Vernon's voice rose slightly before audibly being reined in. We've made it quite clear that we want nothing to do with that sort of thing. The boy will be attending Stonewall High, like normal people. I believe that decision ultimately rests with Mr. Potter himself, the woman replied crisply. Might I speak with him? A long pause. Then Petunia's tight voice, he's in his room. Upstairs, first door on the right. Footsteps on the stairs. Harry quickly retreated to his desk, opening a science textbook to appear casually engaged. His heart pounded as a knock sounded on his door. Come in, he called, trying to keep his voice neutral. The door opened to reveal a tall, severe-looking elderly woman in what appeared to be a dark green business suit. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she regarded Harry through square spectacles with piercing intensity. Mr. Potter, she said, her Scottish accent more pronounced up close. I am Professor Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry stood, offering his hand politely. Nice to meet you, Professor. I'm Harry. If his manners surprised her, she didn't show it. She shook his hand firmly. I'm here to discuss your magical education, Mr. Potter. May I? She gestured to the chair by his desk. Of course, Harry said, sitting on the edge of his bed. Though I'm not sure what I can tell you. I don't know much about Hogwarts. McGonagall studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Indeed? Your aunt and uncle haven't discussed your magical heritage with you? Harry decided honesty was safest here. No, Professor. They told me my parents died in a car crash and never mentioned they were magical. McGonagall's lips thinned in disapproval. I see. That is, unfortunate, though not entirely unexpected. Did you know my parents? Harry asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. I did. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. I taught them both at Hogwarts. They were exceptional students, particularly your mother in charms and your father in transfiguration, my own subject. Harry absorbed this new information hungrily. Alastor had told him his parents were magical but had shared few specifics about them. I'd like to hear about them sometime, he said quietly. And you shall, Mr. Potter. There are many at Hogwarts who remember Lily and James fondly. McGonagall straightened, returning to business. However, my visit today has another purpose. There have been unusual magical occurrences in this area recently. I wonder if you might know anything about them. Harry kept his expression neutral. What kind of occurrences, Professor? Disturbances in the magical field. Fluctuations that don't match accidental magic typically displayed by untrained young wizards. Her gaze was penetrating. And certain energy signatures that are concerning. I don't think I understand, Harry said, which was technically true. He didn't understand how wizards detected magical energy or what specific signatures they might find concerning. McGonagall studied him for a long moment. Mr. Potter, it might interest you to know that I was here, on Privet Drive, the night you were left with your aunt and uncle. That was unexpected. You were. Indeed. Professor Dumbledore, our headmaster, brought you here himself after your parents' murder. I had reservations about placing you with this particular family. Harry couldn't help a small, bitter laugh. Your reservations were justified, Professor. McGonagall's expression softened with what looked like concern. Have they treated you poorly, Mr. Potter? They've improved recently, Harry said carefully. But for many years, yes. They kept me in a cupboard under the stairs until I was 6. McGonagall's nostrils flared with obvious anger. I see. And what prompted the improvement in your situation? Harry hesitated. This was dangerous territory. They realized I was different. Special, maybe. It scared them enough to start treating me better. Different in what way? McGonagall pressed. I could make things happen, Harry said, sticking as close to the truth as possible. Strange things when I was angry or scared. They called it freakishness. I guess it was magic. McGonagall nodded. Accidental magic. Common in magical children, especially during emotional distress. She glanced around his room, her gaze lingering on the shadows in the corners. But the recent disturbances were something more than accidental magic, Mr. Potter. Much more. Harry feigned confusion. I don't know what could have caused that, Professor. McGonagall sighed. Very well. Perhaps we can discuss this more when you're older. She reached into her jacket and withdrew an envelope. This is normally delivered when students turn 11, but given the unusual circumstances, I thought you might appreciate some advance information about your future school. Harry accepted the envelope, recognizing the Hogwarts crest stamped in wax on the back. Your official letter will come next year, McGonagall continued. This is merely an informational packet about the school, its houses, and basic information about the wizarding world that Muggle-raised students often find helpful. Thank you, Professor, Harry said sincerely. I appreciate it. McGonagall stood to leave, then hesitated. Mr. Potter, if there is ever anything concerning happening around you, anything you don't understand or that frightens you, please know that Hogwarts has resources to help. You need only send word. Harry nodded, though he had no intention of revealing Alastor to the wizarding authorities. I'll remember that. At the door, McGonagall turned back once more. Your parents would be proud of how well you've turned out, despite the challenges. You have your mother's eyes, but I see much of your father's resilience in you as well. With that, she left, her footsteps retreating down the stairs. Harry heard brief, terse exchanges with the Dursleys before the front door closed. He immediately opened the envelope, scanning the contents eagerly. Here was information about the wizarding world directly from an official source, something Alastor, for all his knowledge, couldn't provide with the same authenticity. The packet contained a brief history of Hogwarts, descriptions of the four houses, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, and basic information about wizarding culture, currency, and common magical objects. Harry devoured it all, comparing it with what Alastor had told him. Most of the information aligned, though Alastor had been vague about certain aspects of wizarding society that the packet explained in detail. As Harry read, he found himself growing excited despite the complications of his situation. Hogwarts sounded fascinating, a place where he could learn a completely different type of magic to complement what Alastor had taught him. But McGonagall's visit also raised concerns. The wizarding world was watching more closely than he'd realized. How would he maintain his apprenticeship with Alastor while attending a school under Dumbledore's supervision? That evening, as Harry prepared for bed, the shadows in the corner of his room deepened, and familiar static filled the air. Well. Alastor emerged, looking fully recovered and chipper as ever. I leave for a few days and return to find you've had visitors from the wizarding establishment. How exciting. Harry smiled, genuinely relieved to see his mentor. McGonagall seems to suspect something. She mentioned magical disturbances that weren't normal accidental magic. Of course she suspects something, Alastor twirled his staff. The clash with Vox released enough interdimensional energy to alert any competent magical sensor. The question is, what exactly does she suspect? She didn't say outright, Harry replied. But she kept looking at the shadows while we talked, like she could sense something off about them. Perceptive woman, Alastor nodded approvingly. Minerva McGonagall has a reputation for sharp observation. Did she threaten? Warn? Offer help? The last one. Said I could contact Hogwarts if anything concerning happened. Alastor laughed, the sound accompanied by phantom applause. Delightful. They sense something amiss but haven't identified the source. We can work with that. He paced the room excitedly. This accelerates our timeline somewhat. Your official Hogwarts letter will arrive when you turn 11, but we now have confirmation they're already taking an interest. We'll need to adjust your training accordingly. And what about the energy in my scar? Harry asked. You promised we'd discuss it when you returned. Alastor's perpetual smile tightened slightly. So I did. He sat on the edge of Harry's desk. What do you know about soul magic, my boy? Nothing, Harry admitted. It's among the darkest, most complex magical disciplines, Alastor explained. Even most demons approach it cautiously. The manipulation, splitting, or transferring of soul essence can have unpredictable consequences. Harry's hand went to his scar automatically. Are you saying there's someone's soul in my scar? Not a complete soul, no. A fragment, I believe. A splinter. Alastor leaned closer, examining the lightning mark. When the killing curse rebounded from you to Voldemort, something unexpected happened. A piece of his soul, already unstable from previous dark rituals, broke off and latched onto the nearest living vessel. You. Harry felt sick. I have a piece of Voldemort in me. The wizard who murdered my parents. Had, Alastor corrected. That energy you channeled to me during the confrontation with Vox. That was the soul fragment. Not all of it, perhaps, but a significant portion. Our shadow connection provided a conduit to extract it. So it's gone? Harry asked hopefully. Not entirely, Alastor said, his usual bluntness returning. Such things don't disappear so easily. But it's significantly weakened, and more importantly, no longer actively influencing you. Harry frowned. It was influencing me. In subtle ways, I suspect. Perhaps enhancing certain tendencies, diminishing others. Soul fragments seek to preserve themselves by gradually molding their hosts. Alastor tapped his chin thoughtfully. It may have contributed to your affinity for shadow magic, actually. Voldemort himself was quite adept with darkness. Harry absorbed this disturbing information. Can you remove the rest of it? Eventually, Alastor nodded. But carefully, gradually. Ripping it out all at once could damage your own soul in the process. The method we used during the Vox confrontation was effective but risky, a desperation move I wouldn't recommend repeating. What does this mean for my training? It means we diversify even more aggressively, Alastor said decisively. Shadow magic remains your core strength, but you need balance, especially now that the wizarding world is watching. We'll incorporate more traditional magical disciplines, develop your natural wizarding abilities in preparation for Hogwarts. Harry nodded, determined. I want to be ready. For Hogwarts, for Voldemort if he returns, for anything. That's the spirit. Alastor clapped his hands delightedly. My apprentice, straddling multiple magical traditions, prepared for all contingencies. You're going to give the wizarding world quite a shock when you arrive, my boy. As the weeks passed, Harry's training evolved. Alastor introduced elements of traditional wizarding spells, teaching Harry the theory and wand movements even without an actual wand. They worked on potions basics, magical history from a demon's unique perspective, and even some rudimentary ward construction. Versatility is your greatest asset, Alastor emphasized. Most wizards become comfortable in their specialties and neglect other magical branches. Most demons do the same. You will not. Harry embraced the expanded curriculum eagerly, though shadow manipulation remained his favorite discipline. There was something uniquely satisfying about working with darkness, a natural connection he didn't feel with other magical forms. It's in your nature now, Alastor explained when Harry mentioned this preference. 2 years of intensive shadow work during your magical development has left its mark. The shadows recognize you as one of their own, as I've said before. Luna Lovegood said something similar, Harry recalled. That shadows like me, even when I'm not calling them. The Lovegood girl has unusual perception, Alastor acknowledged. You do well to maintain that connection at Hogwarts. Allies with unique perspectives can be invaluable. Harry nodded, making a mental note to seek out Luna when he eventually reached Hogwarts. As his 9th birthday approached, Harry found himself experiencing increasingly vivid dreams, not nightmares exactly, but disturbing visions of a weakened figure in a distant forest, consuming the blood of unicorns, whispering plans of resurrection and revenge. Remnants of the connection through your scar, Alastor theorized when Harry described these dreams. Voldemort still exists in some diminished form, it seems. Interesting that you can perceive him despite the distance. Is he trying to come back? Harry asked. Almost certainly, Alastor nodded. Beings of great power rarely accept defeat as permanent. I imagine he's seeking ways to restore his physical form. Should we do something? Tell someone. Alastor laughed. And say what, exactly? That you're having psychic visions of the defeated Dark Lord through a soul connection partially extracted by your demon mentor. I suspect that might raise more questions than you'd like to answer at this stage. Harry had to admit the point. So we just wait. We prepare, Alastor corrected. Knowledge is power, my boy. These dreams give us valuable intelligence on an enemy most believe is gone forever. We'll use that advantage when the time comes. The dreams continued, growing more frequent as weeks passed. Harry learned to observe them dispassionately, gathering information rather than allowing them to disturb his rest. It was an unusual skill for a 9-year-old, but then, Harry Potter was becoming an increasingly unusual boy. His appearance had begun to change subtly, his green eyes occasionally seeming to glow in dim light, his shadow sometimes moving with slightly delayed timing, his voice developing harmonic undertones when he channeled significant power. The shadow affinity manifesting physically, Alastor explained, seeming pleased with these developments. Nothing dramatic enough to attract undue attention, but signs of your unique magical evolution. Harry wasn't entirely comfortable with these changes, but he'd come to accept them as part of who he was becoming, neither fully human wizard nor demon, but something in between. A bridge between worlds, as Alastor often said. On Harry's 9th birthday, ignored by the Dursleys as usual, Alastor presented him with a special gift, a vintage pocket watch with unusual symbols engraved on its casing. "This is no ordinary timepiece," Alastor explained as Harry examined it. "It's a shadow anchor, a focal point that stabilizes your connection to both the physical world and the shadow realm. Carrying it will make your transition smoother, your control more precise." Harry turned the watch over in his hands, feeling the subtle magical energy emanating from it. "It's incredible. Thank you. You're progressing to more advanced techniques," Alastor said. "The anchor will help prevent accidents." They both knew what kind of accidents he meant: the risk of losing oneself in the shadows, of dispersing across dimensions without the ability to reconstitute properly. Harry had experienced close calls during particularly ambitious shadow-walking attempts. "There's one more feature," Alastor added, tapping the watch face. "If you're ever in true danger beyond your ability to handle, open the case and speak my name 3 times while focusing on our connection. It will create a direct shadow portal to my location, regardless of what realm I'm in at the time." Harry recognized this for what it was, a significant safety measure that showed Alastor's concern for his well-being. "I'll only use it in real emergencies," he promised. "See that you do," Alastor nodded approvingly. "Now, let's celebrate this milestone with a special training session, shall we? I believe you're ready to attempt creating your first shadow construct, a semi-permanent creation of solidified darkness that can exist independently of your direct control." The training session that followed was grueling but exhilarating. By evening, Harry had managed to create a small shadow raven that could fly around his room, maintaining its form for nearly 10 minutes before dissolving back into ordinary shadow. "Remarkable progress," Alastor exclaimed. "Most shadow practitioners require years to achieve even rudimentary constructs. Your natural talent continues to impress." Harry beamed at the praise, though exhaustion pulled at him from the effort. Creating the raven had drained his magical reserves significantly. "Rest now," Alastor instructed, noticing Harry's fatigue. "Tomorrow, we begin working on your occlumency, mental shields that will protect your thoughts from magical intrusion. Essential training before you enter Hogwarts, where mind readers like Dumbledore might discover our arrangement." That caught Harry's attention despite his tiredness. "Dumbledore can read minds?" "Legilimency is the technical term," Alastor clarified. "And yes, he's quite accomplished at it. Subtle enough that most never realize their thoughts are being examined. We can't have him discovering the full extent of your abilities or our connection." Harry nodded seriously. "I'll work hard at it." "I know you will, my apprentice." Alastor began fading into shadow. "You never disappoint." As Harry drifted off to sleep that night, pocket watch clutched in his hand, he reflected on the strange journey that had begun 3 years ago when a demon appeared in his cupboard. He'd gone from a frightened, neglected child to something unique, a wizard apprentice to a powerful demon, capable of magic most humans would never comprehend. The path ahead would be challenging. Balancing his shadow training with his eventual Hogwarts education. Keeping his connection to Alastor secret from wizarding authorities. Preparing for Voldemort's potential return. Navigating the complications of being neither fully human nor demon, but something in between. But for perhaps the first time in his life, Harry Potter felt truly prepared to face whatever came next. With shadow magic flowing through his veins and Alastor's teachings guiding him, the future, however complex, held more promise than fear. In his dreams that night, he walked confidently through landscapes of darkness and light, equally at home in both. No longer the boy from the cupboard. No longer just the boy who lived. Now, he was the radio demon's apprentice. And soon, the wizarding world would discover just what that meant. Chapter 3, Two Worlds Colliding. Harry woke with a start, heart pounding. Another dream of Voldemort, more vivid than ever. The weakened dark wizard had found a host, a stuttering man with a turban who willingly shared his body. They were planning something at Hogwarts. Great, Harry muttered, running his hand through his perpetually messy hair. Just what I need before starting school. At 11 years old, Harry Potter was not what most would expect of the boy who lived. 5 years of training under Alastor had transformed him from a scrawny, neglected child into something unique. He wasn't particularly tall or muscular, but he moved with fluid grace, his green eyes sometimes catching light in unusual ways. His shadow often seemed darker than it should be, occasionally moving a fraction of a second before he did. Harry grabbed the vintage pocket watch from his nightstand, Alastor's gift from 2 years ago, now his most prized possession. The watch showed 6:30 a.m. Too early for the Dursleys to be awake, perfect for his morning practice. He sat cross-legged on his bed and closed his eyes, reaching for the shadows that always lingered in the corners of his room. They responded eagerly, stretching toward him like affectionate pets. After years of practice, this basic shadow manipulation required barely any concentration. Harry shaped the darkness into a series of complex forms, first a raven that flapped silently around the room, then a serpent that coiled around his arm without leaving a physical sensation, finally a perfect replica of himself that mimicked his movements in reverse. Better, he whispered. The shadow constructs had become more detailed over the years, able to maintain their forms longer without constant focus. A soft static filled the air. Impressive control, my boy. Alastor's voice came before his form materialized from the darkest corner. Your constructs have significantly improved. Harry dispelled the shadows with a casual wave. I've been practicing the independent maintenance like you showed me. They can hold form for nearly an hour now without direct concentration. Splendid. Alastor appeared fully, impeccable as always in his red pinstriped suit. Such progress will serve you well at Hogwarts, though I remind you, to be discreet. I know, Harry finished with a smile. No showing off shadow magic in front of wizards who wouldn't understand. Precisely. Alastor twirled his microphone staff. Speaking of Hogwarts, today's the day, isn't it? July 31st. Your 11th birthday. Harry nodded. McGonagall said my letter would come today. A momentous occasion. Alastor's grin widened. The official invitation to join the wizarding world. Though I must say, they're getting a rather different Harry Potter than they're expecting. That was undeniably true. The wizarding world, from what Harry had gathered, expected a boy raised in ignorance of magic, perhaps meek from his time with the Dursleys, certainly untrained. Instead, they would get someone who had walked between dimensions, who could command shadows with a thought, who had established mental shields strong enough to resist most magical intrusion. Do you think they'll notice? Harry asked, genuinely curious. How different I am. Oh, undoubtedly, Alastor chuckled. Though they may not understand what they're seeing. Wizards can be remarkably unobservant about magic that doesn't fit their preconceptions. They'll likely attribute any unusual abilities to your status as the boy who lived rather than suspecting extracurricular education. A noise from downstairs interrupted their conversation, Uncle Vernon's heavy footsteps on the stairs. Duty calls, Harry sighed. Birthday breakfast with the Dursleys. Always a delight. I'll return this evening, Alastor said, already fading back into shadow. By then, you should have your letter. We have much to discuss about your transition to Hogwarts. Harry nodded as Alastor vanished completely, the static fading from the air. Taking a deep breath, he prepared himself for another birthday the Dursleys would pretend didn't exist. Downstairs, the family dynamic hadn't changed much over the years. Vernon and Petunia still treated Harry with wary distance, providing his basic needs while minimizing actual interaction. Dudley avoided him entirely when possible, having never forgotten the demonstration of Harry's abilities years ago. "Morning," Harry said as he entered the kitchen. Petunia nodded stiffly, placing a plate of eggs and toast in front of him without comment. Vernon grunted from behind his newspaper. Dudley, already shoveling food into his mouth, shifted his chair slightly away from Harry's. Harry ate quietly, used to the tension. 5 years ago, this cold treatment would have hurt him. Now, it was merely an inconvenience, a temporary situation until he could enter the wizarding world fully. As he finished eating, the sound of mail sliding through the letter box caught his attention. Without being asked, Harry stood to collect it, anything to break the uncomfortable silence. Among the usual bills and advertisements was an envelope of thick yellowish parchment, addressed in emerald green ink, Mr. H. Potter, the second bedroom 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Harry smiled. It had arrived, exactly as expected. He returned to the kitchen, sorting the regular mail for Vernon while keeping his Hogwarts letter. "This came for me," he said, showing the envelope with its distinctive wax seal. The effect was immediate. Vernon's face purpled dramatically. Petunia dropped the frying pan she was washing with a clatter. Dudley actually stopped eating, wide-eyed. That's one of those," Vernon sputtered. "My Hogwarts acceptance letter," Harry confirmed calmly. "I'll be attending in September." "Now see here," Vernon began, rising from his chair. Harry fixed him with a steady gaze, allowing just a hint of shadow to darken around him. "This isn't a discussion, Uncle Vernon. I'm going. The arrangements have already been made." Vernon deflated immediately, memories of Alastor's arrangement clearly still fresh after 5 years. "Fine. But don't expect us to pay for any of this nonsense. Or drive you to wherever this freak school is located." "That won't be necessary," Harry replied evenly. "Everything is covered." He hadn't actually confirmed this, but he suspected Alastor had plans in place. He left the kitchen, letter in hand, and returned to his room to open it privately. Inside were 2 pieces of parchment, the official acceptance letter and a list of required supplies that included everything from robes and books to a wand and cauldron. Harry read through the list carefully. Some items were familiar from Alastor's teachings, standard wizarding equipment. Others raised questions. How exactly would he purchase these supplies? Where would he even find a wand? He set the letter aside for discussion with Alastor later. For now, he had another birthday to get through with the Dursleys, who would undoubtedly be more unbearable than usual after seeing the Hogwarts letter. The day passed slowly. Harry spent most of it in his room, reviewing his mental shields, the occlumency barriers Alastor had helped him build over the past 2 years. They would be essential at Hogwarts, particularly around Dumbledore, who Alastor warned was a skilled legilimens who wouldn't hesitate to peer into students' minds. By evening, Harry was eager for Alastor's return. When the familiar static filled his room, he felt immediate relief. So it arrived. Alastor materialized, spotting the Hogwarts letter on Harry's desk. "Excellent. Let me see." Harry handed over the parchment, amused by Alastor's enthusiasm. "Standard acceptance letter, standard supply list," Alastor muttered, scanning the documents. "No surprises there. Now we need to plan your grand entrance into Wizarding Society. How exactly do I get these supplies?" Harry asked the most pressing practical question. "I don't have any wizarding money, and I doubt the Dursleys will fund this." "Ah! A perfect question." Alastor seemed delighted. "You, my boy, are not dependent on those insufferable relatives for financial support. Your parents left you quite well provided for." Harry blinked in surprise. "They did?" "Indeed. The Potters were an old, wealthy wizarding family. You have a vault at Gringotts, the wizarding bank, filled with gold galleons, silver sickles, and bronze nuts." Alastor twirled his staff. All you need is the key, which I happen to have acquired through, let's call it creative interdimensional reconnaissance. From thin air, Alastor produced a small golden key. This will grant you access to your trust vault. Your full inheritance becomes available when you reach wizarding majority at 17. Harry accepted the key, turning it over in his fingers. You never mentioned this before. It wasn't relevant until now, Alastor shrugged. Besides, I wanted to confirm the security measures at Gringotts before sending you there. Those goblins have surprisingly effective wards against demonic intrusion. Goblins run the bank? Harry asked, though he shouldn't have been surprised. After years with Alastor, few magical revelations truly shocked him anymore. Naturally. Ruthless with finances, meticulous with security, who better? Alastor began pacing excitedly. Now, we need to plan your first excursion to Diagon Alley, London's hidden magical shopping district. Normally, a Hogwarts representative would escort a Muggle-raised student, but given your unique situation, we'll want to handle this ourselves. Harry nodded. When should we go? Tomorrow would be ideal. The sooner you acquire your supplies, particularly your wand, the sooner we can begin incorporating traditional wizarding magic into your training. Alastor stopped pacing, his expression turning more serious. There's something else we should discuss before your entry into the wizarding world, Harry. What's that? Voldemort. Alastor's voice lost its usual cheerful static. Your dreams have been intensifying, correct? More detailed visions of his activities? Harry nodded, unsurprised that Alastor knew about the dreams. The demon often monitored Harry's sleep patterns, alert for unusual magical manifestations. He's found a host, Harry explained. Someone called Quirrell. They're planning something at Hogwarts, though I couldn't see exactly what. As I suspected, Alastor muttered. Voldemort isn't truly alive nor dead, existing in a liminal state not unlike some demons. He's seeking a way to restore his physical form. And he'll be at Hogwarts? Where I'm going? Harry asked. It appears so. Which makes your preparation all the more critical. Alastor fixed Harry with an unusually serious gaze. Listen carefully, my apprentice. The wizarding world believes Voldemort was defeated permanently that night he attacked your family. They call you the boy who lived because you survived what should have been unsurvivable. They expect a symbol, not a person with autonomous thoughts and unique abilities. So I should pretend to be what they expect? Harry frowned. Not exactly. Be yourself, your carefully curated public self. A boy who is talented but not suspiciously so. Knowledgeable but not omniscient. Powerful but within reasonable boundaries for a child of your background. Alastor's smile returned. Save the shadow walking and demonic connections for private moments. What about Voldemort? Should I tell someone about my dreams? Alastor considered this. Selectivity is key. Dumbledore already suspects something unusual about you, based on McGonagall's visit 2 years ago. Revealing limited information about your Voldemort dreams might actually work in our favor, showing a connection he would expect given your history, while distracting from our other activities. Harry nodded, understanding the strategy. Play to their expectations in some ways to hide the unexpected in others. Precisely. You're learning the art of misdirection beautifully. Alastor clapped his hands. Now, for tomorrow's excursion to Diagon Alley. We'll need a plausible escort, since an 11-year-old wandering alone might attract attention. You can't come visibly, Harry pointed out. No, but I'll be with you in shadow form, Alastor assured him. As for your visible escort, I believe we might arrange for a certain half-giant to receive instructions to collect you. Half-giant? Harry raised an eyebrow. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. Loyal to Dumbledore, kind-hearted toward children, and conveniently easy to influence through certain channels. Alastor's smile turned mischievous. I've arranged for Dumbledore to send him tomorrow morning. A simple compulsion delivered through the dreamscape was all it took. You can do that? Harry asked, impressed despite himself. My dear boy, manipulating dreams is elementary shadow work. Particularly when the target is as guileless as Hagrid. Alastor checked his pocket watch. He should arrive around 9 tomorrow morning. Be ready, and remember, you know nothing about the wizarding world beyond what your letter contains. The next morning, Harry waited impatiently for Hagrid's arrival. He'd dressed in his best clothes, which, while still Dudley's hand-me-downs, were at least the newest and least oversized ones. The Dursleys had left early, eager to avoid any magical visitors after Harry informed them someone would be coming to take him shopping. At precisely 9 o'clock, the house shook with a thunderous knock. Harry hurried to open the door and found himself facing the largest man he'd ever seen. Hagrid stood twice as tall as an average man and was at least 5 times as wide, with a wild tangle of black hair and beard covering most of his face. Harry Potter, the giant man beamed. Last time I saw you, you was only a baby. Yeah, look a lot like your dad, but you've got your mom's eyes. Hello, Harry said, feigning the appropriate level of surprise. Are you from Hogwarts? Rubius Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds, he announced proudly. Dumbledore sent me to help ya get your school things. Figured ya might need guidance, what with bein' raised by muggles and all. That's very kind, thank you, Harry said, genuine gratitude in his voice despite knowing Alastor had manipulated this arrangement. I was wondering how I'd find everything on the list. Not to worry. Hagrid said cheerfully. I know Diagon Alley like the back o' me hand. Got your letter? Harry nodded, patting his pocket where the Hogwarts letter and Gringotts key were safely stowed. Right then, shall we? Hagrid gestured toward the street. Got us a port key to London. Special arrangement from Dumbledore himself. Harry followed Hagrid outside, noticing how the giant man had to duck to avoid hitting his head on the doorframe. As they reached the street, Harry felt the familiar sensation of his shadow deepening slightly, Alastor, accompanying them invisibly as promised. Hagrid pulled out a tattered umbrella from his enormous coat. This here's our port key. Ever traveled by one before? Course not, what am I sayin', you've been with muggles. What's a port key? Harry asked, maintaining his cover of ignorance despite Alastor having taught him about various wizarding transportation methods years ago. Magical transport, Hagrid explained. Touch this umbrella, and it'll take us right where we need to go. Might feel a bit odd if you're not used to it. Harry reached out and placed his finger on the umbrella alongside Hagrid's massive hand. There was a moment of anticipatory silence, then a jerking sensation behind his navel as the world dissolved into a whirl of color and sound. They landed in an alleyway in London, Harry keeping his balance with practiced ease, something Hagrid didn't seem to notice as he steadied himself against a wall. Ah, here we are. Hagrid said cheerfully. Just round this corner is the Leaky Cauldron, famous place, gateway to Diagon Alley. They emerged onto a busy London street. Hagrid led him to a tiny, grubby-looking pub that the muggles around them seemed not to notice at all. It's hidden from non-magical people, Hagrid explained, seeing Harry's careful observation. Magical concealment. Clever, eh? As they entered the dim, shabby pub, conversation stopped. People turned to stare at Hagrid, then their gazes shifted to Harry. The usual, Hagrid, called the bartender. Can't, Tom, I'm on Hogwarts business, Hagrid replied, clapping a hand on Harry's shoulder nearly knocking him over. The bartender peered at Harry. Good Lord, he whispered, can this be? The Leaky Cauldron went completely silent. Bless my soul, the old bartender whispered, Harry Potter, what an honor. He hurried out from behind the bar, seized Harry's hand, and shook it with tears in his eyes. Welcome back, Mr. Potter, welcome back. Harry hadn't expected this level of recognition and adoration. Alastor had warned him that he was famous in the wizarding world, but experiencing it firsthand was jarring. Suddenly, Everyone wanted to shake his hand. They crowded around, repeating his name, thanking him for something he had no memory of doing. Doris Crockford, Mr. Potter, can't believe I'm meeting you at last. So proud, Mr. Potter, I'm just so proud. Always wanted to shake your hand. Harry maintained a polite smile, shaking hands and nodding at the appropriate moments while inwardly strengthening his occlumency shields. This many people focusing intense emotional energy on him created a psychic pressure he hadn't anticipated. A pale young man made his way forward, nervously. One of his eyes was twitching. Professor Quirrell! Hagrid exclaimed. Harry, this is Professor Quirrell. He'll be your defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts. P.P. Potter, Quirrell stammered, grasping Harry's hand, can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you. The moment their hands touched, Harry felt a sharp pain in his scar and something else, a dark, malevolent presence lurking behind Quirrell's nervous exterior. This was Voldemort's host from his dreams, no doubt about it. Harry strengthened his mental shields immediately, using techniques Alastor had taught him to mask his recognition and conceal his own magical signature. Pleasure to meet you, Professor, he said neutrally, withdrawing his hand as quickly as politeness allowed. Fascinating subject, Quirrell continued, seeming not to notice Harry's reaction. And not that you need it, P.P. Potter. He laughed nervously. Harry here needs to get his school supplies, Hagrid said, breaking the uncomfortable moment. Lots to buy. He guided Harry through the bar and out into a small, walled courtyard. Using his umbrella, Hagrid tapped a specific pattern on the bricks. The wall quivered, then opened to reveal an archway onto a cobbled street that twisted and turned out of sight. Welcome, Hagrid said, to Diagon Alley. Harry stepped through the archway into a world of magic. The street was lined with fascinating shops selling everything from cauldrons and telescopes to owls and broomsticks. Witches and wizards in colorful robes bustled about, examining merchandise and greeting acquaintances. Gringotts first, Hagrid announced, pointing toward a snowy white building that towered over the neighboring shops. Wizarding Bank. Run by goblins, so don't try anything funny. They're clever but not the friendliest bunch. As they walked toward the bank, Harry sensed his shadow darkening momentarily, Alastor's way of communicating awareness. The demon was still with him, observing everything. The bank was as imposing inside as out, with marble floors and counters lined with goblins examining precious stones or counting coins. Hagrid led Harry to a free counter. Morning, Hagrid addressed the goblin. We've come to take some money out of Mr. Harry Potter's vault. You have his key, sir, the goblin asked, peering over his spectacles. Got it right here, Harry spoke up, producing the small golden key Alastor had given him. The goblin examined it closely. That seems to be in order. I will have someone take you down to the vault. Grip Hook. Another goblin appeared to escort them. As they followed him toward one of the many doors leading off the hall, Hagrid leaned down to whisper to Harry. Dumbledore gave me another errand while we're here. Very secret Hogwarts business. Won't take but a minute after we visit your vault. Harry nodded, filing away this information. Alastor would be interested in whatever secret Hogwarts business might be. They traveled to Harry's vault in a cart that hurtled through a maze of underground tunnels. When Griphook opened the vault door, Harry couldn't hide his genuine surprise at the mounds of gold, silver, and bronze coins inside. All yours, Hagrid smiled. Harry filled a bag with coins, mind racing with questions about his family that he'd ask Alastor later. What else had his parents left him besides money? What had their lives been like? After his vault, they visited another one, number 713, where Hagrid collected a small, grubby package wrapped in brown paper. Hogwarts business, he said importantly. Very secret. Back in the sunlight of Diagon Alley, Harry consulted his supply list. Where should we start? Might as well get your uniform first, Hagrid suggested, pointing toward Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. Listen, Harry, would ye mind if I slipped off for a pick-me-up at the Leaky Cauldron? Them Gringotts carts always make me a bit queasy. Harry readily agreed, knowing this would give him a moment to confer with Alastor. Once Hagrid had lumbered off, Harry headed toward Madame Malkin's, ducking into a narrow alley beside it when no one was looking. "Alastor," he whispered. The shadows deepened, and Alastor's voice emanated from them. "Fascinating developments, my boy. That turbaned professor is absolutely host to Voldemort. I could sense the parasitic attachment. And that package from Vault 713. Powerful magical artifact, though I couldn't identify it specifically from this distance. What should I do?" Harry asked quietly. "Continue as planned. Get your supplies, particularly your wand. Act natural but observant. We'll discuss strategy more thoroughly tonight." Harry nodded and proceeded into Madame Malkin's shop. Inside, a squat, smiling witch greeted him. "Hogwarts, dear. Got the lot here," another young man being fitted up just now, in fact. In the back of the shop, a boy with a pale, pointed face was standing on a footstool while a second witch pinned up his long black robes. Harry recognized the type immediately: privileged, entitled, used to getting his way. The Dudley of the wizarding world, perhaps, though considerably thinner. "Hello," the boy said as Harry stood on a stool beside him. "Hogwarts, too?" "Yes," Harry replied simply. "My father's next door buying my books and mother's up the street looking at wands," the boy drawled. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Harry said nothing, letting the boy continue his monologue. "Have you got your own broom?" the pale boy went on. "Not yet," Harry answered. "Play Quidditch at all?" "No," Harry said, though Alastor had explained the wizarding sport to him years ago. "I do. Father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house, and I must say, I agree." "Know what house you'll be in yet?" "No one knows until they get there," Harry replied, remembering that fact from his reading. "Well, no one really knows until they get there, but I know I'll be in Slytherin. All our family have been. Imagine being in Hufflepuff. I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Harry shrugged noncommittally. The boy's attitude was grating, but years with Alastor had taught him the value of observing people before judging them too harshly. "I say, look at that man," the boy suddenly exclaimed, nodding toward the front window where Hagrid stood, grinning at Harry and holding up 2 large ice creams. "That's Hagrid," Harry said. "He works at Hogwarts." "Oh," the boy said with a slight sneer. "I've heard of him. He's a sort of servant, isn't he?" "He's the gamekeeper," Harry corrected, a hint of coolness entering his voice. "Yes, exactly. I heard he's a sort of savage, lives in a hut on the school grounds and every now and then he gets drunk, tries to do magic, and ends up setting fire to his bed." Harry felt a flicker of genuine annoyance. "I think he's brilliant." "Do you?" the boy said with a slight sneer. "Why is he with you? Where are your parents?" "They're dead," Harry said shortly. "Oh, sorry," the boy said, not sounding sorry at all. "But they were our kind, weren't they?" "They were a witch and wizard, if that's what you mean." "I really don't think they should let the other sort in, do you? They're just not the same, they've never been brought up to know our ways. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts until they get the letter, imagine. I think they should keep it in the old wizarding families." Before Harry could respond, Madame Malkin announced he was done. Relieved to end the conversation, he paid for his robes and left to rejoin Hagrid. As they continued shopping, collecting books, potions, ingredients, and other supplies, Harry thought about the pale boy's attitude. It was a reminder that the wizarding world, for all its wonders, had its own prejudices and problems. "Just your wand left," Hagrid said finally, consulting the list. "And I still need to get ya a birthday present." "You don't have to," Harry began, genuinely touched. "I know I don't have to. Tell ya what, I'll get you an owl." They're dead useful, carry your mail and everything. 20 minutes later, they left Elop's Owl Emporium with a beautiful snowy owl in a cage, Harry thanking Hagrid repeatedly. It was the first birthday present he'd received from anyone other than Alastor in his memory. Don't mention it, Hagrid said gruffly. Now, Ollivanders for your wand. Only place for wands, Ollivanders. The wand shop was narrow and shabby, with peeling gold letters over the door reading, Ollivanders, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. A single wand lay on a faded purple cushion in the dusty window. As they entered, a tinkling bell rang somewhere in the depths of the shop. Harry felt an immediate change in the magical atmosphere, a prickling awareness of thousands of wands, each with its own magical signature. Good afternoon, said a soft voice. An old man stood before them, his wide, pale eyes shining like moons in the gloom of the shop. Hello, Harry said awkwardly. Ah yes, the man said. Yes, yes. I thought I'd be seeing you soon. Harry Potter. It wasn't a question. You have your mother's eyes. It seems only yesterday she was in here herself, buying her first wand. 10¼ inches long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work. Mr. Ollivander moved closer to Harry, those silvery eyes barely blinking. Harry strengthened his occlumency shields, sensing something almost legilimency-like in that gaze. Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand. 11 inches. Pliable. A little more power and excellent for transfiguration. Well, I say your father favored it, it's really the wand that chooses the wizard, of course. Ollivander had come so close that he and Harry were almost nose to nose. And that's where. He touched the lightning scar on Harry's forehead with a long, white finger. I'm sorry to say I sold the wand that did it, he said softly. 13½ inches. You. Powerful wand, very powerful, and in the wrong hands. Well, if I'd known what that wand was going out into the world to do. He shook his head, then spotted Hagrid. Rubeus Hagrid. Oak, 16 inches, rather bendy, wasn't it? It was, sir, yes, Hagrid said. Good wand, that one. But I suppose they snapped it in half when you got expelled, said Mr. Ollivander, suddenly stern. Yes, they did, yes, Hagrid said, shifting uncomfortably. I've still got the pieces, though, he added brightly. But you don't use them, said Mr. Ollivander sharply. Oh, no, sir, said Hagrid quickly, gripping his pink umbrella very tightly. Said Mr. Ollivander, giving Hagrid a piercing look. Well, now, Mr. Potter. Let me see. He pulled a long tape measure with silver markings out of his pocket. Which is your wand arm? I'm right-handed, said Harry. Hold out your arm. That's it. He measured Harry from shoulder to finger, then wrist to elbow, shoulder to floor, knee to armpit and round his head. As he measured, he said, every Ollivander wand has a core of a powerful magical substance, Mr. Potter. We use unicorn hairs, phoenix tail feathers, and the heartstrings of dragons. No two Ollivander wands are the same, just as no two unicorns, dragons, or phoenixes are quite the same. And of course, you will never get such good results with another wizard's wand. The tape measure continued measuring on its own while Ollivander flitted around the shelves, taking down boxes. That will do, he said, and the tape measure crumpled into a heap on the floor. Right then, Mr. Potter. Try this one. Beechwood and dragon heartstring. 9 inches. Nice and flexible. Just take it and give it a wave. Harry took the wand and waved it around a bit, but Ollivander snatched it out of his hand almost at once. Maple and phoenix feather. 7 inches. Quite whippy. Try, Harry tried, but he had hardly raised the wand when it, too, was snatched back. No, here, ebony and unicorn hair, 8½ inches, springy. Go on, try it out. Harry tried wand after wand. The pile of tried wands mounted higher and higher, but Ollivander seemed to grow happier with each rejection. Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry, we'll find the perfect match here somewhere. I wonder, now, yes, why not, unusual combination, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. Harry took the wand. He felt a sudden warmth in his fingers, and something else, a resonance with his shadow magic, as if the wand recognized and accepted this other power within him. He raised the wand and brought it swishing down through the dusty air. A stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end like a firework, throwing dancing spots of light onto the walls. Hagrid hooped and clapped, but Ollivander cried, "Oh, bravo! Yes, indeed, oh, very good. Well, 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 how curious, how very curious." He put Harry's wand back into its box, still muttering, "Curious, curious." "Sorry," said Harry, "but what's curious?" Mr. Ollivander fixed Harry with his pale stare. "I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand, gave another feather, just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, why, its brother gave you that scar." Harry swallowed. Through his connection to the shadows, he felt Alastor's presence intensify, clearly interested in this revelation. "Yes, 13.5 inches. You. Curious indeed how these things happen. The wand chooses the wizard, remember. I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things, terrible, yes, but great." Harry paid 7 gold galleons for his wand, unsettled by Ollivander's words but also fascinated by the connection between his wand and Voldemort's. Another link between them, beyond the scar and the dream visions. As they left the shop, Harry sensed a subtle shift in the shadows around him. Alastor was concerned. The revelation about the wand was significant, though Harry wasn't sure yet what it meant. Hagrid guided him back toward the leaky cauldron, where they would catch a regular train back to Surrey. As they walked, Harry noticed the shadows near a narrow side alley behaving strangely, moving against the light rather than with it. Alastor's warning tingle brushed against his consciousness, a technique they developed for silent communication. "Danger. Hagrid," Harry said quickly, "I just remembered, there was a book I wanted to look at. Do you mind if we pop back to Flourish and Blots for a moment?" "Course not," Hagrid said good-naturedly. "Lead the way." Harry deliberately took them on a route away from the strange shadow activity, feeling Alastor's approval through their connection. Something was wrong, and neither of them wanted Hagrid caught in the middle of it. They spent another 15 minutes in the bookshop, Harry selecting an additional book on defensive magic as a plausible reason for the detour. By the time they emerged, the shadow disturbance seemed to have passed. But Harry remained on alert. He'd learned through years with Alastor that threats rarely disappeared, they merely retreated to plan a better approach. The journey back to Privet Drive was uneventful. Hagrid escorted him all the way to number 4, helping carry his packages and the owl cage. "Your ticket for Hogwarts," Hagrid said, handing Harry an envelope. "1st September, King's Cross Station, it's all on your ticket. Any problems with the Dursleys, send me a letter with your owl, she'll know where to find me. See ya soon, Harry." With that, the giant man turned and walked away down the street. Harry watched until he was out of sight, then carried his school supplies inside. The Dursleys were nowhere to be seen, probably still out avoiding potential magical visitors. Harry brought everything up to his room and waited impatiently for Alastor to materialize. He didn't have to wait long. Static filled the air, and Alastor appeared, looking uncharacteristically serious. "Well, my boy, quite the eventful shopping trip," the demon said, examining Harry's purchases with interest. A brother wand to Voldemort's, a mysterious package from a high-security vault, and Vox making an appearance in Diagon Alley, most entertaining. "That was Vox?" Harry asked, alarmed. "The shadow disturbance?" Indeed. Observing from the periphery, not directly interfering, yet. Alastor picked up Harry's wand box, studying it without touching the wand itself. He's waiting for an opportunity. The question is, what triggered his interest today specifically? Maybe he was watching all along, waiting for me to enter the wizarding world. Possible, but unlikely. Vox prefers electronic surveillance, and Diagon Alley is saturated with magic that disrupts such technologies. Alastor tapped his chin thoughtfully. No, something today caught his attention. Perhaps the wand connection. Or Quirrell's presence. Both represent links to Voldemort, which might interest our television friend for reasons of his own. Harry considered this while arranging his new school supplies. What was that package Hagrid collected? You said it was a powerful artifact. Difficult to identify precisely from shadow observation alone, but it radiated old magic, protective and transformative in nature. Alastor's eyes gleamed. Given the timing and security, I'd wager it's related to whatever Voldemort is seeking at Hogwarts. Should I be concerned? Vigilant, yes. Concerned, not immediately. Alastor resumed his usual cheerful demeanor. You have more pressing matters to address, such as mastering your new wand. Harry picked up the Holly and Phoenix feather wand, feeling again that strange resonance with his shadow abilities. It feels compatible with both my wizarding magic and the shadow work. Fascinating. Alastor peered at the wand without touching it. Wands typically resist shadow magic, too much ordered energy. But this one, perhaps the Phoenix core, creates a bridge. Phoenixes exist in cycles of death and rebirth, straddling boundaries much as shadows do. For the next month, Harry's training intensified. With his wand, he could now practice proper wizarding spells alongside his shadow abilities. Alastor pushed him harder than ever, knowing that once at Hogwarts, opportunities for certain types of training would be limited. Your shadow walking must be perfected, Alastor insisted during one session. It may be your only reliable means of private communication once you're at school. They practiced in Alastor's pocket dimension, where Harry could attempt increasingly complex shadow transitions without risk of being observed by wizarding authorities. The trace on underage magic doesn't detect shadow work, Alastor explained, but traditional spells with your wand will be monitored. Save those for Hogwarts where they'll be expected. Harry mastered basic spells quickly, his years of magical training giving him a significant advantage over students raised without such preparation. By the end of August, he could perform most first-year spells non-verbally, an advanced skill typically not taught until 6th year. Keep that ability quiet, Alastor warned. Use verbal incantations like the others. Standing out too much invites unwanted scrutiny. As September 1st approached, Harry prepared both practically and mentally for his entry into the wizarding world. He packed his trunk with school supplies and the few personal items he valued, including several shadow-enchanted objects Alastor had given him over the years, carefully disguised as ordinary trinkets. The night before his departure, Harry sat cross-legged on his bed, fine-tuning his occlumency shields with Alastor's guidance. Your outer layer seems appropriately ordinary, Alastor observed, probing Harry's mental defenses with gentle shadow tendrils. Surface thoughts a typical 11-year-old might have: excitement about Hogwarts, curiosity about magic, normal anxieties. Excellent misdirection. Harry maintained his concentration, adjusting the layered shields they'd constructed over years of practice. The outermost level contained benign, expected thoughts. Deeper layers held increasingly sensitive information, protected by shadow constructs that would divert or confuse any intruding mind. And your innermost sanctuary? Alastor prompted. Harry focused on his core mental space, the private chamber where his most important memories and knowledge about shadow magic and his relationship with Alastor resided. This area was protected by shadows so dense they were nearly physical, wrapped around his secrets like a protective cocoon. Secure, Harry confirmed. Though maintaining all these layers simultaneously will be challenging while also learning and socializing. Practice makes perfect, Alastor said cheerfully. Speaking of which, we should finalize our communication method while you're at Hogwarts. They had discussed various options over the past month. Regular letters were too easily intercepted. Conventional magic might be detected. Shadow walking to meet in person carried risks if done from a castle filled with powerful wizards who might sense the dimensional disturbance. I've created something special, Alastor said, producing a small, vintage-looking radio from within his suit jacket. This appears to be an ordinary wizarding wireless. Many students bring them to Hogwarts for entertainment. But this one has been modified. Harry examined the radio. It looked perfectly ordinary, if somewhat antique in styling. The modifications, he prompted. Tuned to frequencies beyond normal hearing, or normal magic, Alastor explained. Set the dial to these specific positions, he demonstrated a particular pattern, and speak my name 3 times. It will establish a shadow connection between us, allowing communication without you needing to fully shadow walk. Won't Hogwarts' magical protections interfere? That's the beauty of it. Alastor beamed proudly. Hogwarts wards are designed to prevent conventional magical communication methods. Flow networks can be monitored, apparition is blocked, port keys are controlled. But shadow frequencies exist perpendicular to regular magical energy. The founders never thought to ward against them because they didn't know such magic existed. Harry took the radio, feeling the subtle shadow enchantments woven into its components. This is brilliant. Of course it is. I made it. Alastor preened. Now, there is one limitation, it works best at night, when natural shadows are strongest. Daytime communication will be possible but more detectable to particularly sensitive magical observers. I'll use it carefully, Harry promised, packing the radio in his trunk. They spent the rest of the evening reviewing contingency plans. What to do if Harry's shadow abilities were discovered. How to respond if confronted by Dumbledore. Strategies for handling Quirrell/Voldemort without revealing too much knowledge. Remember, Alastor said as midnight approached, you're entering a world that has specific expectations of who Harry Potter should be. Use those expectations as camouflage while you observe and learn. The boy who lived is your public face, my apprentice remains our secret. Harry nodded, understanding the strategy. And Vox? You think he'll make another move before I leave? Almost certainly, Alastor's expression darkened momentarily. He's been too quiet since Diagon Alley. That usually means he's planning something significant. As if summoned by the mention of his name, the shadows in Harry's room suddenly twisted unnaturally. The temperature dropped sharply, and electronic static, different from Alastor's radio static, filled the air. Right on cue, Alastor muttered, materializing fully as the disturbance increased. Harry, your defenses. Harry was already moving, drawing his wand with one hand while manipulating shadows with the other. Years of training kicked in automatically as darkness pooled around his feet, responding to his will. The light bulb in Harry's lamp exploded, plunging the room into darkness broken only by moonlight through the window. That too was quickly obscured as shadows thickened unnaturally, taking on a strange electronic quality that Harry recognized from previous encounters with Vox. How touching, came the TV demon's distorted voice, emanating from Harry's digital alarm clock. Final lessons before the little apprentice flies the nest. I thought I should offer an alternative perspective before he commits to 7 years of outdated education. Your timing is impeccable as always, Vox, Alastor replied cheerfully, though Harry could sense his mentor's power gathering for confrontation. Unfortunately, Harry's enrollment is already finalized. Perhaps try again in another century or two. The shadows coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape with a television for a head, though not fully materialized, a projection rather than Vox's actual presence. Harry Potter, the TV demon addressed him directly, ignoring Alastor. You stand at a crossroads. Wizarding magic is primitive, limited by outdated traditions and arbitrary restrictions. What Alastor teaches you is marginally better, but still anchored in the past. I offer something more, the future. Technology and darkness combined. Power beyond what either of them can conceive. Harry maintained his defensive stance, shadows swirling protectively around him. I've seen your idea of recruitment before. Not interested. You haven't even heard my proposal. Vox's screen displayed a smile. I'm not asking you to abandon your wizarding education. Quite the opposite, attend Hogwarts, learn their ways, but allow me to supplement your education. I can provide insights Alastor can't, about the future, about adapting magic to the modern world, about power sources he doesn't understand. The boy has made his choice, Alastor interjected, stepping forward. You're trespassing, Vox. Again. Am I? Or am I simply ensuring young Harry makes an informed decision? Vox's projected form grew more solid, drawing power from the shadows around them. Tell me, Harry, did Alastor mention that his style of magic is dying out? That radio demons are increasingly irrelevant in a digital world? That what he teaches you may be obsolete before you even master it? Harry glanced at Alastor, whose smile had tightened almost imperceptibly. He didn't, did he? Vox continued. Just as he probably didn't mention that maintaining your connection has weakened him considerably over the years. The great radio demon, diminished by his investment in a human child. Touching, but hardly strategic. If you're done monologuing, Harry said coolly, I have packing to finish. My answer is still no. Vox's screen flickered with momentary surprise at Harry's dismissal. You've taught him your stubbornness, Alastor. But not your wisdom. Very well, if reason won't persuade you, perhaps a demonstration will. The shadow projection suddenly expanded, darkness flooding the room. Electronic tendrils shot toward Harry from all directions, not attacking directly but attempting to encircle him. Harry reacted instantly, slashing his wand through the air while simultaneously commanding his own shadows to form a protective barrier. The two types of magic, wizarding and shadow, combined naturally, creating a shield that rippled with both energies. Impressive reflexes, Alastor noted approvingly, his own power manifesting as crimson-tinged darkness that pushed against Vox's electronic shadows. Vox, you're outmatched. The boy is more capable than you realize. We'll see, Vox replied. The television screen that served as his head displayed scrolling code for a moment, then his shadows changed tactics, pulling back only to surge forward with renewed intensity. This time, they targeted Alastor rather than Harry, attempting to sever the connection between mentor and apprentice. Black tendrils with glowing electronic edges wrapped around Alastor's form, trying to drag him back into the shadow realm. Alastor. Harry called out, alarmed. Focus on your own defense. Alastor commanded, fighting against the restraints with visible effort. He's trying to separate us, don't fall for it. Harry gritted his teeth, mind racing. This was clearly Vox's plan, isolate him from Alastor's protection just before he entered the wizarding world. But why? What did the TV demon gain? No time to analyze. Harry needed to act. Drawing on 5 years of training, he gathered shadow energy in his left hand while raising his wand with his right. The combination felt natural, powerful, wizard and shadow walker working in harmony. Enough, Harry said, infusing the word with the commanding power Alastor had taught him years ago. His voice carried unusual resonance, echoing in the small bedroom as if spoken in a much larger space. He thrust his wand forward while simultaneously releasing a controlled burst of shadow energy. The combined magical force slammed into Vox's projection, disrupting its cohesion. The electronic tendrils holding Alastor wavered. Interesting, Vox's voice distorted further. The wand amplifies your shadow abilities rather than conflicting with them. Unexpected. You've underestimated my apprentice, Alastor said, leveraging the momentary weakness to break free of the restraining shadows. A common mistake among those who think too highly of themselves. Together, Harry and Alastor pressed their advantage. Harry channeled power through his wand, creating a concentrated beam of magical energy that disrupted Vox's manifestation, while Alastor manipulated the natural shadows of the room to counter the electronic darkness. Vox's projection began to destabilize, the television screen flickering erratically. "This isn't over," he warned. "The wizarding world holds dangers you haven't prepared for, Harry Potter. When Alastor can't reach you, when you're surrounded by those who would control you for their own purposes, remember my offer." "I think I can handle myself," Harry replied coolly, maintaining the pressure. With a final surge of combined magic from Harry and Alastor, Vox's projection collapsed entirely, the unnatural shadows retreating and the electronic static fading away. Harry lowered his wand, breathing hard from the magical exertion. "He's gone." "For now," Alastor confirmed, adjusting his monocle which had been knocked askew during the confrontation. "That was merely a projection, a fraction of his actual power. But still, an impressive victory." "Why is he so interested in me?" Harry asked, voicing the question that had bothered him for years. "What does he gain by turning me against you?" Alastor was quiet for a moment, considering his response. "Vox and I have been rivals for decades, centuries, really. But this goes beyond our usual competition." He studied Harry with unusual seriousness. "You represent something unprecedented, my boy, a bridge between multiple magical traditions with potential beyond what either demons or wizards typically achieve. Whoever influences your development gains significant advantage in the balance of power. So I'm just a piece in your game?" Harry asked, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "Initially. Perhaps," Alastor admitted with surprising candor. "But as I've told you before, you've become important. Beyond strategic considerations." He straightened his bow tie. "Besides, the game is far more complex than Vox realizes. The wizarding world introduces variables even I can't fully predict." Harry nodded, accepting this explanation while filing away his lingering questions for later consideration. "Will Vox try again before I leave for Hogwarts?" "Unlikely. That was his final play, at least until you're at school, where my influence is more limited." Alastor gestured at the modified radio in Harry's trunk. "Which is why our communication channel is crucial. Vox was right about one thing, there will be those at Hogwarts who seek to control or influence you for their own purposes." "Dumbledore," Harry guessed. "Among others. The headmaster has his own agenda for the boy who lived, I'm certain." Alastor resumed his usual cheerful demeanor. "But that's a challenge for another day. For now, you should rest. Tomorrow you enter the wizarding world officially, and you'll want your wits about you." Harry nodded, though sleep seemed unlikely after the confrontation with Vox. As he prepared for bed, a thought occurred to him. "Alastor? Was Vox telling the truth? About your power being diminished by maintaining our connection?" The demon paused, his perpetual smile tightening slightly. "Power is always in flux, my boy. Investments sometimes require temporary sacrifices for greater returns." He adjusted his monocle. "Nothing for you to worry about." Which wasn't really an answer, Harry noted, but he didn't press further. If maintaining their connection had indeed weakened Alastor over the years, confronting him about it wouldn't change anything. "Get some sleep," Alastor said, already fading into shadow. "I'll be watching over things tonight in case our television friend has any further ideas." After Alastor vanished, Harry lay awake for some time, mind racing with thoughts of what awaited him at Hogwarts. Everything would change tomorrow. For 5 years, he'd lived a double life, ordinary boy to the muggles around him, shadow apprentice to Alastor in private. Now he would add a third identity, Harry Potter, the boy who lived, Hogwarts student. Could he balance all these roles without losing himself in the process? The next morning dawned bright and clear. Harry woke early, double-checking his packed trunk to ensure nothing would reveal his shadow training. His specialized books were hidden beneath ordinary schoolbooks. Shadow-enchanted objects were disguised as harmless trinkets. The modified radio looked like any other wizarding wireless. Uncle Vernon grudgingly agreed to drive him to King's Cross, though Harry suspected it was more about ensuring he actually left than any kindness. The trip passed in tense silence, broken only when they arrived at the station and Vernon finally spoke. "Well, there you are, boy. Platform 9, Platform 10. Your platform should be somewhere in the middle, but they don't seem to have built it yet, do they?" He was right. There was a big plastic number 9 over one platform and a big plastic number 10 over the next, with nothing in between. "Have a good term," Uncle Vernon said with a nasty smile, then drove away, leaving Harry standing with his trunk and owl cage. Harry wasn't concerned. Alastor had explained about platform 9 3/4 and how to access it, a simple case of walking through what appeared to be a solid barrier between platforms 9 and 10. He positioned himself casually near the barrier, watching other wizarding families to confirm the method before attempting it himself. Soon enough, he spotted a family of redheads approaching, talking openly about Hogwarts and Muggles. Harry observed as the oldest boy marched toward the barrier and simply vanished. Then twins followed. Confident in the technique, Harry decided to proceed rather than wait. Pushing his trolley forward, he walked briskly toward the barrier, focusing on his shadow senses to help navigate the magical transition. There was a moment of darkness, a subtle shift in the magical atmosphere, and then he emerged onto platform 9 3/4. A scarlet steam engine waited next to a platform packed with people. A sign overhead read, "Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock." Smoke from the engine drifted over the heads of the chattering crowd, while cats of every color wound here and there between their legs. Owls hooted to one another in a disgruntled sort of way over the babble and the scraping of heavy trunks. Harry pushed his trolley down the platform, looking for an empty compartment. Along the way, he noticed the shadows behaving normally, no sign of Alastor or Vox watching from the darkness. This journey was his to make alone. He found an empty compartment near the end of the train and managed to heave his trunk aboard with only minor difficulty. After settling Hedwig, as he'd named his snowy owl, by the window, Harry took a seat and observed the platform through the glass. Families said their goodbyes. First years looked nervous. Older students greeted friends enthusiastically. It was a scene of ordinary wizarding life that Harry had only heard about from Alastor's descriptions. As the train began to move, Harry felt a curious mixture of emotions: excitement about finally entering the wizarding world properly, anxiety about maintaining his various identities, and a strange sadness at leaving behind the intensive training sessions with Alastor. For 5 years, the radio demon had been his primary connection to the magical world, mentor, teacher, and something close to family. Now Harry was venturing into a different magical tradition, one with its own rules and expectations. The compartment door slid open, interrupting his thoughts. The youngest redhead boy from the family he'd observed on the platform stood there. "Anyone sitting there?" he asked, pointing to the seat opposite Harry. "Everywhere else is full." "Go ahead," Harry invited, curious about his first potential wizard-raised peer. The boy sat down, glancing at Harry and then quickly out the window, as if shy. "I'm Ron, by the way." "Ron Weasley," he finally said. "Harry Potter," Harry replied, watching for the reaction. Ron's eyes widened predictably. "So it's true. I thought it might be when I saw you alone. Do you really have the, you know?" He pointed at Harry's forehead. Harry lifted his bangs to show the lightning scar. Ron stared. "So that's where you know who?" "Yes," Harry said, "but I don't remember it." "Nothing?" said Ron eagerly. "Well, I remember a lot of green light, but nothing else." This was partially true, the dreams showed more, but Harry wasn't about to mention those. "Wow," said Ron. He sat and stared at Harry for a few moments, then quickly looked away, embarrassed. The conversation flowed naturally from there, Ron explaining about his large family, Harry carefully constructing the image of a boy raised by muggles who knew little about magic. It was strange to deliberately downplay his knowledge, but Alastor had emphasized the importance of meeting expectations initially. Their conversation was interrupted several times, first by a round-faced boy looking for his lost toad, then by a bushy-haired girl named Hermione Granger who spoke very fast and seemed to have memorized all their schoolbooks. She was Muggle-born, Harry gathered, but eager to prove herself in the wizarding world. Later, the pale boy from Madame Malkin's appeared, flanked by two larger boys who looked like bodyguards. "Is it true?" he said. "They're saying all down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment." "So it's you, is it?" "Yes," said Harry, studying the boy more carefully now. "This is Crabbe and Goyle," the pale boy said casually. "And my name's Malfoy, Draco Malfoy." Ron gave a slight cough, which might have been hiding a snigger. Draco Malfoy looked at him. "Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father told me all the Weasleys have red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford." He turned back to Harry. "You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there." He held out his hand to shake Harry's, but Harry didn't take it. "I think I can tell who the wrong sort are for myself, thanks," he said coolly. Draco Malfoy's pale face turned slightly pink. "I'd be careful if I were you, Potter. Unless you're a bit politer you'll go the same way as your parents. They didn't know what was good for them, either. You hang around with riffraff like the Weasleys, and it'll rub off on you." Both Harry and Ron stood up. Ron looked ready for a fight, but Harry remained calm, drawing on years of dealing with Dudley's provocations. He allowed just a fraction of shadow energy to darken the space around him, not enough for anyone to consciously notice, but enough to create a subtle sense of unease. "I suggest you leave," Harry said quietly, his voice carrying that slight resonance that happened when he channeled power. Malfoy took an involuntary step back, confusion flickering across his face at his own reaction. "We don't feel like leaving, do we, boys? We've eaten all our food and you still seem to have some." Goyle reached toward a chocolate frog next to Ron, but before he could grab it, he let out a horrible yell. A rat hung from his finger, sharp little teeth sunk into Goyle's knuckle. The three boys retreated hastily as Goyle swung the rat around until it finally flew off and hit the window. After they left, Ron reclaimed his rat, Scabbers, who had gone back to sleep as if nothing had happened. "You've met Malfoy before?" Ron asked. Harry explained their brief encounter in Diagon Alley. "I've met his type before," he added. "My cousin Dudley is similar, thinks he's entitled to whatever he wants." As the countryside flying past the window became wilder and darker, Ron told Harry more about the wizarding world from his perspective, explaining Quidditch in detail, discussing the 4 Hogwarts houses, sharing wizarding sweets and stories. Harry participated enthusiastically while carefully monitoring how much knowledge he revealed. It was a balancing act, showing enough awareness to seem like a quick learner without exposing his years of prior magical education. When Ron mentioned Gringotts and a recent break-in, Harry's attention sharpened. "Break-in? I thought Gringotts was supposed to be impenetrable." "That's what everyone thought," Ron said. "Dad says it must have been a powerful dark wizard to get round Gringotts, but they don't think they took anything, that's what's odd. Course, everyone gets scared when something like this happens in case you know who's behind it." Harry filed this information away. A break-in at Gringotts shortly after Hagrid had removed that mysterious package from Vault 713. Unlikely to be coincidence. As evening fell, they changed into their school robes, and soon afterward, a voice echoed through the train, "We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes' time. Please leave your luggage on the train, it will be taken to the school separately." Harry's stomach lurched with nerves and excitement. This was it, his official entry into the wizarding world. He checked that his wand was safely in his pocket and that his occlumency shields were firmly in place. Whatever awaited him at Hogwarts, he was as prepared as he could be. The train slowed and finally stopped. Students pushed their way toward the doors and out onto a tiny, dark platform. Harry shivered in the cold night air, though the darkness felt comfortingly familiar after years of shadow work. A lamp bobbed over the heads of the students, and a familiar voice called, "Fur's years. Fur's years over here." "All right there, Harry." Hagrid's big hairy face beamed over the sea of heads. Harry smiled and waved back. Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down a steep, narrow path. It was so dark on either side that Harry suspected the path was bordered by thick forest. Nobody spoke much. "Y'all get your furs sight Hogwarts in a sec," Hagrid called over his shoulder, "just round this bend here." There was a loud boo-hoo. The narrow path had opened suddenly onto the edge of a great black lake. Perched atop a high mountain on the other side, its windows sparkling in the starry sky, was a vast castle with many turrets and towers. "No more than 4 to a boat," Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats sitting in the water by the shore. Harry and Ron were joined in their boat by Hermione and the round-faced boy, Neville. Then the fleet of little boats moved off all at once, gliding across the lake, which was smooth as glass. As they sailed toward the castle, Harry sensed a change in the magical atmosphere. The air itself seemed charged with ancient power. Hogwarts wasn't just a school, it was a magical entity in its own right. He could feel it reaching out, recognizing new students, welcoming them. And somewhere, deep in his awareness, Harry felt something else, a faint pulse from his scar, a distant awareness of something malevolent waiting within those castle walls. Voldemort, or at least the fragment of him hosted by Quirrell, was already there. Harry strengthened his occlumency shields, determined not to reveal his knowledge. Let Voldemort believe he was facing an ordinary first year, ignorant of the danger and unprepared for confrontation. The element of surprise would be Harry's advantage when the time came. The boats carried them through a curtain of ivy that hid a wide opening in the cliff face. They drifted along a dark tunnel until reaching an underground harbor, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. Hagrid led them up a passageway in the rock, coming out at last onto smooth, damp grass right in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge, oak front door. "Everyone here." Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. The door swung open to reveal Professor McGonagall, looking exactly as stern as she had during her visit to Privet Drive 2 years earlier. She led them across the flagged stone floor into a small, empty chamber off the hall. "Welcome to Hogwarts," she said. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses." As she explained the house system, Harry took the opportunity to observe his fellow first-years more carefully. Some looked terrified, others excited. The Malfoy boy appeared smugly confident. Ron looked slightly green. Hermione Granger was whispering spells under her breath, apparently preparing for some kind of test. Harry kept his own expression neutral, hiding his inner calculations. Which house would best serve his purposes? Alastor had discussed the attributes of each, but had deliberately not pushed Harry toward any particular one. "The sorting will reveal aspects of your true nature," Alastor had explained. "Better to let it happen naturally than try to game the system. Besides, you can thrive in any environment, I've trained you to adapt." When McGonagall returned to lead them into the Great Hall, Harry followed with the others, maintaining an appropriately impressed expression as they entered the magnificent space with its thousands of floating candles and enchanted ceiling that mirrored the night sky. Harry quickly scanned the staff table, identifying Dumbledore from his silvery beard and half-moon spectacles. The headmaster was watching the first years with benign interest, though Harry sensed something more calculating beneath that grandfatherly exterior. Quirrell was there too, his purple turban standing out among the other teachers. Harry's scar prickled as their eyes briefly met, but he quickly looked away, not wanting to trigger any suspicion from the hidden Voldemort. Professor McGonagall placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat, patched, frayed, and extremely dirty. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched, a rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing. As the sorting hat sang about the 4 houses and their qualities, Harry considered his options. His shadow abilities might align with Slytherin's cunning approach. His academic interests could place him in Ravenclaw. The courage required for some of his shadow-walking experiments certainly had Gryffindor elements. Even Hufflepuff's loyalty resonated with his commitment to his training with Alastor. When the song ended and McGonagall began calling names, Harry waited patiently, observing each sorting with interest. Hermione Granger became a Gryffindor, as did Neville Longbottom. Draco Malfoy was immediately sorted into Slytherin. Finally, Potter, Harry, was called, and whispers suddenly broke out across the hall. "Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter?" Harry stepped forward, catching a last glimpse of a sea of faces staring up at him before the hat dropped over his eyes and the world went black. Said a small voice in his ear. "Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself, now that's interesting. But what's this? Shadow magic? A demonic mentor? How extraordinary." Harry stiffened, immediately reinforcing his occlumency shields. He hadn't anticipated the hat would dig so deeply into his mind. "Occlumency won't work on me, dear boy," the hat chuckled. "I'm not reading your surface thoughts like a legilimens. I'm seeing your fundamental qualities. And you have quite the unusual combination. Your connection to shadows would suggest Slytherin, but there's more to you than that." Harry remained silent, uncertain how to respond. "Don't worry," the hat assured him. "Your secrets are safe with me. I've seen stranger things in my 1,000 years on student heads. Now, where to put you? With your particular education, you could excel in any house." "I need to be where I can best prepare," Harry thought back. "For what's coming?" "Ah, purpose. Yes, that clarifies things considerably. Better be, Gryffindor." The last word was shouted to the entire hall. Harry removed the hat and walked shakily toward the Gryffindor table, where he received the loudest cheer yet. Percy Weasley, Ron's prefect brother, got up and shook his hand vigorously, while the Weasley twins chanted, "We got Potter. We got Potter." As Harry sat down, he caught Dumbledore's eye from the high table. The headmaster raised his goblet slightly in what seemed like approval. Next to him, Professor McGonagall was actually smiling. But it was another face that caught Harry's attention, Professor Quirrell, who was staring at him with an unreadable expression. For a brief moment, Harry thought he saw a flash of red in those otherwise unremarkable eyes. The rest of the sorting proceeded quickly. Ron joined Harry in Gryffindor, looking relieved. After a few announcements from Dumbledore, including a curious warning about the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side being out of bounds to everyone who didn't wish to die a very painful death, the feast began. Harry ate hungrily, participating in the conversations around him while carefully maintaining his facade of a boy newly introduced to magic. His fellow Gryffindors were curious about him, of course, but seemed to accept his vague answers about life with the Dursleys. When the feast finally ended, Percy led the first years through the castle's portrait-guarded entrance and into Gryffindor Tower. Harry found himself assigned to a dormitory with Ron, Neville, and two other boys named Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas. Too tired to talk much, they pulled on their pajamas and fell into bed. Harry, however, remained awake long after the others began snoring. He waited patiently, using shadow senses to confirm his dorm mates were truly asleep before silently retrieving the modified radio from his trunk. Moving to the window alcove where moonlight cast deep shadows, Harry set the radio dials to the pattern Alastor had shown him. He whispered the demon's name 3 times, focusing on their connection. Static filled his ears, not from the radio speaker but seemingly from the air itself. Then Alastor's voice, faint but unmistakable, "Apprentice. Successful journey, I see. Gryffindor, no less, how delightfully traditional." "The Sorting Hat saw everything," Harry whispered urgently. "It knew about you, about the shadow magic, everything." "Not unexpected," Alastor replied, his voice strengthening as the connection stabilized. "The hat is an ancient magical artifact designed to see students' true natures. Fortunately, it's bound by powerful magic to keep its discoveries private. It mentioned a clemency wouldn't work on it. If Dumbledore has similar abilities, he doesn't. Different magical principles entirely. Your shields will hold against conventional legilimency. Static interrupted briefly before Alastor continued. More importantly, how does Hogwarts feel? Can you sense the school's magic? Harry considered this. It's alive, somehow. Not conscious exactly, but aware. The magic here is old, layered. I can feel it interacting with my own. Excellent observation. Hogwarts magic will gradually attune to you, just as you'll attune to it. This creates opportunities. Shadow walking within the castle will become easier as you become part of its magical ecosystem. They spoke quietly for several minutes, Harry sharing his observations about Quirrell/Voldemort, the warning about the third-floor corridor, and his general impressions of staff and students. Alastor listened attentively, offering occasional guidance. Remember your training, Alastor said as they prepared to end the communication. Observe before acting. Build connections. Learn the castle's secrets. We have time to develop our strategy for dealing with Voldemort. And Dumbledore? Harry asked. He'll be watching me. Undoubtedly. Give him the Harry Potter he expects, eager, somewhat naive, but naturally talented. Meanwhile, continue your shadow training in private. The balance between these worlds is delicate, but you've been preparing for this for 5 years. The static began to fade, indicating their time was limited. Before the connection broke completely, Alastor added, I'm proud of you, my boy. You're navigating this transition admirably. Trust your instincts, they've been well honed. With that, the connection dissolved, leaving Harry alone with his thoughts in the moonlit dormitory. Outside the window, the grounds of Hogwarts stretched into darkness, the forbidden forest a mass of shadows in the distance. Harry returned the radio to his trunk and climbed back into bed, reflecting on the day's events. He had officially entered the wizarding world now, a student at Hogwarts, sorted into Gryffindor, already making connections and observations that would serve him in the challenges ahead. Whatever those challenges might be, Voldemort's plans, Dumbledore's scrutiny, the ordinary struggles of schoolwork and socialization, Harry felt prepared to face them. 5 years of Alastor's tutelage had given him tools and perspectives most wizards couldn't imagine. He was Harry Potter, the boy who lived, Gryffindor first year. He was also the radio demon's apprentice, shadow walker, straddling multiple magical traditions. As sleep finally claimed him, Harry's last thought was of shadows, not as places of fear and darkness, but as doorways, connections between worlds, paths to power and knowledge that had transformed him from a frightened boy in a cupboard into something unique. The wizarding world thought they knew what to expect from Harry Potter. They were about to be surprised. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.